Hi, everyone. All right. Clark, are you taking the main housing executive presentation?
Yes, we have 3 presentations actually. We have the HIP, Housing Investment Plan, we have a presentation on stock transfer, and we were also asked to do a presentation on adaptations.
Right.
So hopefully we'll not bore you too much.
So did you yourself first? Yep.
Yeah, I'll do the HIPs, and then my colleague Andy Kennedy will do the stock transfer.
Yeah.
And then Leanne Vincent will do the adaptations.
Okay.
And I can see Frank, one of my colleagues, Frank's already here. So any hard questions, Frank can answer them.
Hello, Clark. How are you? John Kelpie.
Oh, John, well?
I am indeed. Good to see you, albeit virtually.
Sorry, I didn't hear what you say there.
I say good to see you again, albeit virtually.
Indeed, it's a bit strange still, isn't it?
It is indeed. Clark, have you been? Have you talked to our chair, Darren Guy?
We're just having a quick introduction, yes.
Okay, that's great. And you've got other colleagues on the line there as well.
I see Andy Kennedy and I see Frank O'Connor's here as well. We're expecting Eddie Docherty, excuse my Belfast pronunciation of his surname, and Paul Isherwood, and I think Leanne Vincent, and there's another colleague, I'm not sure, I don't see him. John, he'll probably join us in a few moments.
Okay, Andy and Frank, you're very welcome. And if Eddie's on the call, you're very welcome too.
Thank you.
That must be nearly us all in, is it? Okay, folks, I think that's everybody. Everybody, John Boyle, the only one that's not there. I see. Martin, is he coming or?
I'm here now. I'm here.
Are you there? Sorry, John. Sorry.
I just tuned on there. Thanks. Sorry, Darren.
Okay, I'll make a start then. Welcome everyone to the Governance and Strategic Planning meeting for Tuesday the 3rd of November. John, if you want to go ahead there and read the summons.
Okay, thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, members. Members of Governance and Strategic Planning Committee, hereby summoned to attend the monthly meeting of the committee to be held remotely today, Tuesday the 3rd of November at 4 o'clock, and starting with the roll call members, Alderman Breslin.
Here.
Alderman Guy.
Here.
Alderman McClintock.
Here, John.
Alderman McCready.
Here.
Councillor John Boyle.
Yep.
Councillor Michaela Boyle.
Shaw John here.
Councillor Cooper.
Shaw John.
Councillor Donnelly.
Shaw.
Councillor Duffy.
Shaw.
Councillor Fleming.
Shaw John.
Councillor Gallagher.
Shaw John.
Councillor McKeever.
Here, John.
Councillor Mooney.
John.
And Councillor Riley.
Here, John.
Thank you, members. Back to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, John. And I'll read the statement for remote meetings. I would like to remind everyone who is in remote attendance that this meeting will be broadcast live via the Council's YouTube channel and will be available for viewing by the public and media. The broadcast will also be available for repeated viewing at a later date. This broadcast may be terminated or suspended in accordance with Council protocol. Members and approved speakers are reminded to only have their mics and cameras on while speaking at the meeting and use the chat facility to highlight a request to speak. By participating in this meeting, you're consenting to being filmed and to the use and storage of those images for broadcasting or training purposes and for the purpose of keeping historical records and making those records available to the public. A copy of the Council privacy notice may be found on the Council website. And just a reminder to keep deliberations short, folks. Any apologies? No, everyone here. So declarations of members' interests, or if you should just want to put them in the chat box there as we go along. And we'll go ahead now and do the deputations. And we have 3 deputations from the Housing Executive here today. Clark Bailey, you are going to take the first one if I'm correct. So I'll hand over to you now and you can fire away with it.
Can you hear me okay? Yes?
Yep.
It's better now. Sorry, I pushed the wrong button. Apologies. I think on what is quite an eventful day for the Housing Executive. Delighted to be here virtually. I missed my trip up to Derry. But I think it's just a sign of the times. What I want to do first is to present our housing investment plan. Now I'm not sure how this will work if you put something on the screen, but I'm assuming you have the presentation. You can follow it yourselves. Is that okay? So,
John, is it going on the screen or is it?
Yeah, I think is Rory Devine Housing Executive Officer?
yes.
Yep.
Yes, I think Rory's going to share.
Thank you, Rory.
Yep.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. This is something we do each year, and the next slide will show that we're obliged to do it, but I think we would still do it anyway because it's really important to share with you what we've done over the last year and sometimes what we haven't done and what's our forward look, and also really importantly, how does what we do fit in with your community plan, because we put a lot of emphasis on getting that good effective partnership working. So as you can see from the next slide, there are 2 purposes for the housing investment plan. Next slide, please, Rory. Thank you. It's not something we do in a darkened room in isolation. We actually do quite a bit of consultation, and we hope that this is a useful document for you. It's not just about the housing executive stock, but it's about cross-tenure housing issues right across the council area. So it includes the private sector, owner occupation, and so on. It's the first of 3 annual updates covering the 2019-23 housing investment plan. And as I said earlier, hopefully it does mesh well and fits in with your community planning priorities within the council, particularly your strategic growth plan. The next slide shows that in our HIP, as we call it, we've got 4 high-level outcomes. The first one, as you would probably expect, is helping people address their housing issues, finding housing support and solutions that actually work. We're also very focused on delivering better homes. We do administer the new build programme, we administer the grants programme, but we also have a very significant investment programme for our own stock. Previous years I've said that one of the issues we don't have enough money to do everything we need to do, but hopefully today's announcement will open up a very big door for us to be able to borrow and invest in our own stock and start building again. So I'm really delighted about that. We also feel that the work we do is not just about our own properties, but we also want to contribute to the development of vibrant, sustainable communities. and we're very proud of the strong links we have with the communities who live in our estates and beyond. And finally, like any public organisation, we have to provide good value for money, good effective services, services that customers want, can easily access, and so on. So as you can see, our housing investment plan reports in progress over the last year, and it's hopefully, I say again, it chimes with what you want to do. So we could have the next slide, please. It's hard to avoid talking about coronavirus or COVID-19. It was difficult for us. I think we have weathered the storm pretty well. We certainly started to plan for it quite early, and we set ourselves a number of very key targets. And one was to protect the health and safety of our customers, our staff, our contractors. We also wanted to protect key and core services, particularly emergency repairs. And a lot of effort was put into making sure that was the case. We also recognised that we needed to keep paying our suppliers, our customers, firms doing grant work, housing benefit customers, and our staff. So we set ourselves those high-level targets. I think it has been difficult because it was unique. Certainly, I've never seen anything like it before. And a lot of the contingency planning only took us a certain amount of the journey, certain distance. We did become very innovative. I was impressed throughout by colleagues who just found new ways of doing things. And sometimes people who moan and groan an awful lot, they just went ahead and did it. And it was great to see. I'm really proud of colleagues. And we did find new ways of working, particularly remote working. And this presentation is probably a good example of that. Previous years we did it in person, but now we can actually do things digitally. And hopefully it'll work for the rest of the presentation. So if we look back in the next slide, I'm sorry, there's a booklet we produced to just set out what we've done during COVID. I hope that's not just interesting, but also useful. We did have quite ambitious plans in terms of investment last year. Our investment programme has been difficult to implement for a number of reasons. One is that contractors are very quick to issue procurement challenges when they don't win the bids. And we have found that a real problem, very frustrating. We also recognise that there are capacity issues within the construction industry. And sometimes contractors have not been able to respond in the way we would like them to. And then, of course, COVID hit us towards the end of March. And as you can see on that slide, we had to take the only decision in March was to suspend everything except for emergency repair work and statutory inspections. And that was difficult sometimes, getting access to tenants' properties to check their gas boilers and do the servicing. But we did the best that we could. We were very keen to get things back up and running again. And by June of this year, we had started to move away from the lockdown. I think the first thing we did was we started doing grounds maintenance. We were very careful to make sure the community knew what we were doing. And then we just extended that to outdoor work. And then we started to do the plant maintenance again. So things were going quite well. We were making recovery, but we're back in this situation where it's difficult to predict with any certainty what's going to happen over the next couple of months. One of the things we've noticed, for example, is the supply chain has been disrupted, particularly raw materials. So it's learning new things and how to adapt and adjust the way we work. I think the next slide shows what we actually did achieve last year. As you can see, we invested just over £38 million in your council area. The largest single item is the investment in stock. We had 8 million planned maintenance, and on top of that, we had another 4 million or so on response maintenance. We also, working through housing associations, issued grants totaling over £10 million for the new build programme. And that's really important because your area is one of the areas of significant housing need. So we're very focused on it. And again, that's something the Minister mentioned in her speech to the Assembly this morning. Supporting People programme, very important in terms of providing practical housing support to vulnerable people. And that was just under 9 million at 8.7 million. So overall, I think it's a significant amount. We want to do more. We need to do more, and particularly in terms of our stock investment. But hopefully as we move on, we will be able to achieve that. The next change, the next slide rather, is looking at the demographics within the council area. And you can see the age breakdown and the change from 2018 to 2028. Overall, as far as I'm aware, the population of Derry City and Strabane area is expected to reduce by about 0.4%, so pretty static up to the 2028 period. And by the end of that period, your council will represent, I believe, about 8% of the Northern Ireland population. One of the key measures, the key factors in the demographic change is the increasing number of older people. And that's something we've been considering for quite a while now. And this year we released our older person strategy in terms of what type of accommodation is needed to address the particular needs of people as they get older. I'm very much focused on people remaining within their own homes, but recognising that there is a need to look at adaptations and perhaps different forms of housing that suit their needs better. Our chair is very keen on extra care, for example, which is maybe quite a specialised area looking at people with particular healthcare needs. So I'm going to ask Rory to go on to the next slide, please. As you can see, in your area, it's just over 60,000 homes. That was in 2016. Over half would be owner-occupied. About a fifth would be the private rental sector. And the social sector, that's the housing executive and associations, would be just under a quarter. If you look at the house prices, there's been a slight increase over the last couple of years in your area. The average is about £133,000 per property. If you compare that, to give an interesting statistic, well, I think it's interesting. Last year we sold just under 60 housing executive properties, and the average price was 51,000. So that gives you an idea of the relative values. Rents in the area, I think there could be affordability issues. Figures we have show that the average is about £120 a week. Apartments would be at the lower end, about £109 a week. Detached properties would be at the higher end at £163 a week. So in terms of people's access to the private rental sector, that's a key factor. And again, that was something which featured in the Minister's statement to the Assembly this morning. So moving on to the next slide. As you can see, unfortunately, despite our best efforts, the waiting list is increasing. The number of people deemed to be in housing stress, i.e. 30 points or more, it's about 77% of the total. So both indicators are rising over the last year or so. You can see a steady upwards movement there. If you look towards the bottom of the graph, the number of allocations has come down. What we have found is that housing executive tenants in particular tend to stay in their home. They don't particularly want to move. And while that creates very stable communities, it means that we don't have that churn of new properties which we can allocate. Our void level, certainly before COVID, was at an all-time low, which indicates the pressure on social housing. One of the things that we do obviously is try to increase supply through the new build programme. This area is probably done comparatively better than some other areas, but we still recognise there is a high need and high demand for social housing in your council area. And again, your area has been identified as one of the higher need areas by the Minister, and our proposals today were around ring fencing. But we'll have to work our way through that over the next couple of weeks and months. So if we turn to the next slide on household breakdown, it's looking at the number of applicants who are deemed to be in housing stress. I said 30 points or more. And you can see quite quickly that the two largest groups are single persons and small families. And that's something which is difficult to address quickly because our stock tends to focus more on the larger family-sized property. So a mismatch has emerged between the type of property that people want and the type of property that we own. The next slide gives some information on the reasons for people becoming homeless. By far, the largest percentage is that their current arrangements break down, their sharing arrangements break down, And if you add up the domestic violence, sharing breakdown, and marital relationship breakdown, you get about 38% of the total. Accommodation not suitable is 28%. Used to be a sense that that was older people who, because of mobility issues or particular needs, found it difficult to cope with their home. But there's a very significant proportion of accommodation not reasonable related to people's perhaps mental health issues that they do have particular needs there. So it is very much a changing environment. And I think customers' needs are becoming more complex and more complicated. And certainly we see that when people come to us for help. Loss of rental accommodations, 14%, probably dampened a bit over the last couple of months because of the minister's directions around evictions during the COVID period. So turning to the next slide. Some of the things we've already mentioned: aging population. Our stock in your area is just under 9,000. It used to be a lot more, as some of you will know better than I do. I mentioned an increase in demand, the level of housing stress, the number of people presenting as homeless, although there has been a decrease, and about 61% of people presenting would be accepted as homeless. And then we're obliged to step in and make sure there's proper arrangements for at least temporary accommodation and then hopefully more permanent accommodation. And as you can see, last financial year, there were 764 social housing allocations in Derry City and Strabane area. So just another slide. The next slide is picking up some more of the key housing issues. You can see there was quite a reasonable level of activity in terms of new build. You can see 500 homes, or 505 were completed, another 818 homes going on site. But we do recognise, as I said earlier, there is significant need within this area. And over the next 5 years, we've estimated that we need just under 3,000 new social housing units. Under the plans for the social housing development programme for the 3-year period 2020-23, we've already identified just under 1,600 potential starts. Obviously, we have a bit of work to do to close that gap, but I hope it gives some confidence that there is a focus on addressing housing need within your council area. And just again, many of our customers rely on housing benefit or universal credit to help them get by and pay their rent. And that's the just under 16,000 receipt of housing benefit. And that would be split between those living in social housing and those in the private rental sector. So to move away to perhaps give a more local focus, pick up some of the local office issues. Again, I'm incredibly proud of the efforts that my colleagues made during and continuing to make during the COVID period. They really did go beyond and above the call of duty, and their energy and enthusiasm and just the way they cared about people was absolutely fantastic. We are continuing to manage the impact of welfare reform and universal credit. Unfortunately, we have noticed an increase in rent arrears. We're putting a lot more effort into collecting rent. It's costing us more. As one of my colleagues used to say, we're doing more and spending more to collect less. Maybe not as bad as I'd feared. There was a bit of a recovery, but we're concerned as the economic impact of COVID begins to bite even more. How will that affect some of our tenants, and how will it affect tenant or customers in the rental sector or trying to pay off their mortgage? So we're very much focused on how do we work with customers to make sure we collect the rent. And we are fair, but we're also firm. We have an obligation to collect rent. And what we've noticed is that our customers are presenting to us with a greater vulnerability, physical health, mental health, substance dependency, and that's something which is becoming more and more common. And certainly the use of what I would call hard drugs, I wouldn't claim to be an expert in these areas, is actually quite frightening at times. We are trying to provide practical solutions. We do take time to speak with customers when they come to us. We try and identify their particular needs. We try and give them choices. We try and give them the information they need to make an informed choice. But I must admit, sometimes it can be difficult because we simply don't have the social housing stock to meet their expressed needs. And we do really appreciate the links we have with the local council, with public reps, with local communities. And hopefully we are making a positive contribution to building stronger, safer, healthier communities where people actually feel welcome and safe and they want to live there. So just to sum up very quickly, we will continue to report outcomes against our housing investment programme, our housing investment plan rather. We will come to you each year. It'll not be me next year, I'll be retired next year, but it'll be someone else coming along. We are really keen to work with you. We think there's genuine, significant, positive benefits to be secured for the community by working with partners, particularly local councils, to get the benefits of community planning. And I think we have a really good relationship with you and your colleagues, Chair, and we're very happy to continue working on that basis. So that's really all I wanted to say. I hope I haven't taken too long, but we're more than happy to take questions, obviously.
Thank you, Clerk, very much for that presentation. It's probably best that we do the next two presentations because we'll probably get questions that'll cross one another anyway. Is that okay with you? Wait.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Whatever works best for you.
Yeah, that's okay. So we'll do it that way. So the next two presentations come from a council motion passed in February 2020 that the Housing Executive present to the relevant committee on housing stock transfer and disabled adaptations in housing executive properties. And the Housing Executive obviously felt that it was better to do all three presentations together. So they're here today. So I think, is it Andy is doing the next presentation?
It is, Chair, yeah.
Okay. Go ahead there.
Thanks very much, Chair. Rory, is it possible to put up my presentation or do I need to share it? No response. So I'll bear with me a second, please, and I'll share it from my laptop then.
Rory's on mute. There, can you hear all right, Rory? Are you able to put up the presentation?
Chair, it's fine. I can share it on my laptop here, and I'll put it up.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe somebody can just confirm to me it should be coming up. Can everybody see that? Okay.
Yeah, there's something happening, Andy. Yep, that's it.
Yeah, that's it, Andy.
It's come up. Yeah, thanks. Okay, Chair and Councillors, thank you very much for the invitation to come along and speak to you about stock transfer. I have a very short presentation just to introduce myself. I'm the Assistant Director for Asset Strategy and Investment Planning in the Housing Executive. In summary, that means I'm responsible for analysing our stock, its investment needs, and recommending to Clark, the directors and the board, on the actions we should take in terms of our investment plan and in terms of disposals and conversions and that sort of thing. Stock transfer was one of my responsibilities, and I was also the project manager for the two stock transfer schemes that we did. So I've actually got hands-on experience of doing stock transfer as well as sort of being responsible for it now. If we just move on, I'm going to quickly run through my presentation, and I'm sure if you've already read my presentation, the very last slide has been upstaged by the Minister this morning, but I'll talk about that anyway when we get to it. So very quickly, I thought it would be useful just to say what is stock transfer, and that's fairly straightforward. This is the transfer of the ownership and management of public sector homes to housing associations. It's been a plank of mainstream housing policy in GB for quite some time, and the main aim was that councils across the various jurisdictions were finding it difficult to resource the funding to invest in council housing stock, and there were various methods were brought in to transfer social housing into the private sector. Stock transfer was one of them. Almos and housing companies were another one. But stock transfer was about transferring social housing, public sector houses to housing associations who could get private borrowing on which to fund investment programs. Legally, we are able to transfer properties. I've got it down there in my presentation. Article 88C of the Housing Order. It allows us to dispose of tenanted properties subject to the consent of our parent department, the Department for Communities. In order to do so, we're required to demonstrate that a majority of those affected by the transfer do not oppose the proposal. And what we have done to ascertain that was bring in a formal consultation process that would culminate in a transfer ballot. So why was stock transfer considered by the Housing Executive? Well, I mean, I suppose my first bullet point there is pretty self-evident. As Clark said, our aim is always to bring our properties up to modern day standards. Many of you will be familiar with the expression, the MEI program, or Multi-Element Improvement Program. This was a program that was funded through capital funding that we got through sales of our land and our properties. This was to bring houses up to modern standard in terms of space standards. It was also to do complete refurbishments. It looked at big health and safety schemes. So, as you know, the property crash back in 08-09 meant that we weren't selling land, we weren't selling houses. So our funding for that program more or less ended. It absolutely completely reduced. So the department and ourselves looked at how would we deliver the outstanding MEI schemes that we could no longer fund. And we were asked to bring forward a stock transfer pilot scheme. The pilot scheme, as I'm sure many of you will know, was done in Rinmore in the city. And it was followed by another pilot scheme at Bloomfield and Bangor. And in the end, we transferred 55 properties in Rinmore to Apex Housing Association, and we transferred 73 bungalows in Bloomfield to what was then Oakley, is now Choice Housing Association. And again, there were extensive tenant consultation exercises were carried out, and the tenants agreed to the transfer, and the department approved them on that basis. As a result of those two pilots, the minister at the time then asked us to bring in a 2,000 dwelling transfer programme, and that was included in the housing strategy for Northern Ireland that came out around about that same time. So if I quickly just look at the programme, originally our programme was made up of lots of the MEI schemes that we weren't able to deliver. Now, lots of these were quite small schemes, so the programme at that time, the original programme was a large number of small schemes. As time went on, and on the basis of a Northern Ireland Audit Office report on the stock transfer project, there was a review carried out by ourselves in the department in 2014, and it actually used some of the experts that were brought in for the SHRP at the time. Just to cut to the chase, as a result of that review, we reconfigured the programme into estate-based transfers, and there were 6 estates, and one of those was a local estate in the city of Rothville, as I'm sure many of you know. We ended up taking 2 estates through the transfer process. That basically means submitting a business case to the department, getting its approval to proceed, appointing housing associations, and then undertaking with them consultation exercises with the tenants. The first one of these was Grange Estate in Ballyclare. It was about 180 dwellings. We did the exercise, and the tenants rejected that in 2017. We then carried out another exercise in Billy and Ballymena, which is a much larger estate of over 300 dwellings. That again was also rejected by the tenants in 2018. As a result of that, when we spoke to the department agreed that the project should be suspended. Now, I think the point to make is it hasn't been formally terminated yet. That can only be done by a ministerial decision, and as yet no minister has actually formally terminated it. But for all intents and purposes, stock transfer has been, to use an expression, dead in the water for 2 years now. Those 6 estates that we had in the programme, they have all been reinstated in our investment programme, and there are a series of schemes that have already taken place or are planned in the future years for all of those estates. I thought it would be useful just to recap some of the reasons why we think the tenants rejected it. We had actually hoped to carry out a sort of review with the tenants themselves and to do sort of series of meetings, but we actually found that the tenants weren't willing to do it. I think there was a bit of weariness on the tenants' part by the time we got to this. So based on the project team's experience, we brought in Housing Rights Service as an independent tenant advisor. Based on their observations, based on the Housing Association's observations, these are sort of the key points that we thought were behind the reasons for rejecting the transfer. First of all, it is very obvious in all of the transfers that we've either done or we have tried to proceed with, that the tenants were very wary of housing associations, and particularly about housing association rent. I'm sure all of you will know association rents for the same type of house tend to be about maybe 20 to 25% higher than our own. In fact, that's probably even higher by now, given that we have had a rent freeze for 4.5 years. So there was particular concern about transferring over for those tenants who maybe were only on partial housing benefit or didn't get housing benefit at all. Secondly, I think it was quite clear to ourselves that tenants maybe didn't fully appreciate the rationale as to why transfer was being put forward. Many of the properties in the estates, when we went to an estate-based exercise, those estates were a mixture of properties that needed significant investment and others that needed less investment. So there wasn't a very obvious rationale for transferring to get investment in the properties. Others were content with the sort of short-term housing executive investment that we would have been able to commit to, and in fact that we're now delivering. What we had said at the time was that beyond the 5-year period, we really couldn't make any commitment to future investment, whereas the housing associations could. But as I say, many of the tenants appeared to be satisfied with what we could promise in the next 5 years. And I think the point that, well, the Minister has made it very clear this morning, our feeling has been at the time that our funding dilemma, and I'm going to talk about it in the next slide, it's not a major public issue that's in the public domain. And the example I've always used before, if a hospital was going to be closed down, there would be people with placards outside, the trust outside the hospital itself. But the funding dilemma that the housing executive has in terms of being able to invest in its stock does not have that profile that many other things do. And we just don't think it was in people's minds. There was no doubt a degree of apathy and weariness that set in as well, because we've been at this for quite some time. And I think lastly on this one, I would say there was a very proactive and I would say a very effective anti-transfer campaign that was waged by a number of groups, and that no doubt had an influence on the tenants that were in those estates. I think I'll just finish up the slide that has really been, I've been upstaged by the Minister this morning. You'll appreciate that this slide was done before the Minister made her announcement. I thought I'd finish with our current investment position. We agreed a revised investment approach with the department in 2017. So it was a 3-year period to allow the department to look at options for the future. It was based on addressing backlogs in kitchens, bathrooms, heating, doors, windows, on doing adaptations, on doing external cyclical maintenance, and on doing the sort of landlord responsibility work. But as I say on my slide there, the imperative is to develop a long-term solution to your stock investment funding requirements. Anybody who listened to the Minister this morning, you'll have heard her say that over the next 30 years, there was a figure of 7.1 billion projection required to achieve and maintain modern standards for all of our stock. It was actually my team in the housing executive who did that calculation. We are the ones who produce the investment requirement projections for not only the board, but also for the department. Just to look to the next 10 years, we have £1 billion shortfall against what we need. So the Minister said, yes, we have about 3 billion, 2.5, 3 billion. It all depends whether you add inflation into it. But we have said over the last lot of years, we're £1 billion short over the next 10 years if rents stay as they are. And that's really one of the key issues that the Minister said this morning. I've in there the future of SHRP, capital funding allocations and rent increases remains uncertain. Hopefully this morning we've got a little bit more certainty as to where the direction of travel is. And again, the Minister and I was going to make note of the new decade new approach proposals, that if we can do something about our loan debt or outstanding loan debt, if we can do something about our liability for corporation tax, they will certainly help to reduce the gap between what we need and what we have. But those two alone would not bridge it. It does require action on things like rent as well. So at the time, what I've been doing over the last several months, in fact this year, at potential strategic options as to how we would get investment in our stock. Obviously, that will now be influenced by what the Minister has said this morning. And I think the bullet point that I put at the very end has probably been ruled out by the Minister. At the time, it's like, could stock transfer be resurrected? And my view was, yes, it possibly could have, but I think we've got the minister now saying that she would prefer to go down a cooperative or mutual line rather than looking at stock transfer. So that's been a very quick run through stock transfer. As I said, it's been in the doldrums, or I say we have been doing nothing on it for 2 years now. There's certainly no indication that the department wanted us to return to stock transfer. So I say at the end, if you want to wait the questions until after Leanne has done her adaptations, I'm quite happy to take any questions on it.
Thank you, Andy, for that. So I think Leanne's next then. Is Leanne doing the next presentation, or?
That was the plan, Chair, yes.
Yep.
There she is.
Yep. Can
Okay,
you
then,
hear me
take it away.
okay?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So shall I share my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Excuse me. Can everyone see that okay?
Yep. Working fine. No, it's not there now.
Can you see that? Did you see it for a bit there?
Yeah.
You seen it and then it was gone, is that right?
Leanne, it's because you're using a shared screen. If you just put it up as a normal presentation and then just increase the size of it, should take care of it. Or do you want me to put it up?
I think I might have managed it. Not I think it is because I've got dual screen. Is it easier for you to share yours, Paul, or?
It's up. It's
If you just increase the size of it in the bottom right-hand corner, that should bring bottom right-hand corner where it says 77%.
Ah, okay. And you want it up to? Is that better?
Yeah.
Too much.
I don't know if the quality will be there for you. Is that better?
You need to bring it down slightly down to about. Keep going. That's it. That's it.
Is that better? How does that look?
Yeah, that's grand there.
See
Yeah.
that okay? Is that okay for me to start?
That's dead on there now. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Hopefully this works okay. Okay, so my name is Leanne Vincent, and similar to Andy, I'm Assistant Director in Asset Management, and the section that I look after is the project delivery section, mainly around the the contractor works. So today I've been asked to give a presentation on the major adaptation. I'll try not to, I've produced a variety of slides. I'll try not to go into too much detail in each of them, and obviously at the end, if there's any specific questions, we can take them. Okay. Oh goodness, have I lost it? You can still see the screen, can you?
No, it's gone. It's gone.
I move, sorry, apologies for this. I think it's when I try to move forward.
Nothing there yet, no.
What can you see now?
There's nothing on the screen, yeah, and it's just that everyone's picture.
I think it's screens you see, and I think it's the problem of the setup of.
Leanne, do you want me to put it up and then you just talk through it?
probably better that way.
Yeah, I'll put it
Sorry.
up, Leanne. I'll put it up and then you can talk through it.
Yeah, that's fine. Would that be better?
Leanne, I think
Yeah.
Paul's going to put it up there, and
Yeah.
then you just
Okay.
speak through it then. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about this.
Oh, you're right. Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. All right. So, Paul, will I go to the next slide then? Yeah.
Yeah, that's okay.
So just moving down to the contents page. Okay, so I'll just talk through the historical overview, the in-house design pilot, the adaptations review project, and then the numbers past and present, and then time for questions. Okay, so moving on to the historical overview. For those of you that don't know the background, the major adaptations programme was delivered by the design group based in Hill Street from 2009 to 2016. In 2016, the teams then moved out to the asset management regional offices, moving from the central design group. In the September of 2016, DFC had approached us to have discussions around an inspection team coming in, as they had identified backlogs and issues of concern, and they wanted to come in and have a little initial discussions with DFC. We'd advised that we were aware of what needed to be done. We just needed some time to go and do it. And we had asked them for some grace of a 12-month period before they would come back, and they did so. They returned the following year, and we then subsequently received a satisfactory grading in the May of 2018 with a few recommendations that we picked up and have completed on since then. We then created a central adaptations post at the start of the project, the review project, which was in 2016. And then commenced with our South Region pilot team in the 2017. So the previous 2 to 4 years was the adaptation time, and that's really where we came from. So just moving on down to the fourth slide. I'll not talk through all of this, but just to give you a synopsis, if you look to the right column, the right column is the South Region pilot, which the Minister actually referred to today in her speech. And that is the pilot that we undertook in South Region. And some did ask why South Region. Upon looking at each region between North, South and Belfast, South seemed to have a significantly higher number of adaptations than the other regions. So we thought, for economies of scale and various reasons, best to address our pilot there and take it from there. As you can see from the pilot column on the right and then the middle column, you see the differentiation of the weeks and the reductions in timescales as a result of our review project. At the very bottom, you can see the 43 weeks, which is what the Minister alluded to today, and the reductions in timescales. So that's a project that's been ongoing for over 2 years now. So it has been tried and tested on various projects, and it is a project that is now migrated up to North Region, which is the area that we're discussing today. Whilst they're slightly behind the South Region area, it is a process that has been undertaken there in certainly in the last 12 to 18 months. So you can see as well that a large number of the weeks difference is around the procurement area, around stage 2, and we've addressed that by the utilisation of a contractor framework. So within that breakdown, you can see how that impacts. We do have a live contractor framework at the moment, and it is due to expire in the next couple of months, and we have another one out to tender that we're hoping to award in the next couple of months. We did hope to have this done earlier in the year in the March-April period. Obviously COVID came, and then various restrictions came with that in terms of procurement, but that is very important to us, and it's very important particularly in the north area. So moving down to the next slide, which is the pilot project benefits. So this is just a rough synopsis of the benefits of the South project and what we've now replicated in other regions. So there was really, if you look at, I'll not read through all of those, but it was really about increasing speed, with obviously standardisation and better stakeholder engagement, discussions with OTs, and really the customer focus at the heart of that. And also the Insight project management tool, which we'll go on to discuss. So moving on down to the next slide, Paul. So this is the limitations that we faced and which we continue to face, and we have faced since we started this project in 2016. Number one being the construction industry, which Clark also alluded to earlier, are the issues that you would have in terms of capacity. And you know, we did mitigate a lot of this by the contractor framework, in that we don't have to go out with these constant packages, which was what was happening before. And we would have waited for a bundle to go out and tender maybe a half a dozen projects or a dozen at once. And if you were the first project on the list, you would have waited significant weeks or maybe months for the bundle to be accumulated. And that doesn't happen now because it's a rolling framework. However, outside of that, we still do have problems with capacity in terms of the amount of contractors that we try to engage. Now, we have mitigated those risks by having a variety of things such as stakeholder engagement days, and we've reached out to the people that were currently in contract with us and others. We tried to reach out to more of the smaller builder, and we did manage to get some new entrants to the market, but we are finding that certainly these guys are also finding difficulties themselves in resourcing various things such as bricklaying trades and mechanical and electrical trades. We're finding that the electrical side is tricky, and we know this to be true as we even have these issues in our own DLO, so we do know that these are industry issues. We've done other things such as engage with GFC and engage with various bodies such as CITB in discussions about where we take this with the likes of apprenticeship programs and where we can take the future on this to help bring us back to mitigating the risks even further. So the second issue would be scope creep, and that's in relation to the OT and district changes. We were finding that quite often, you know, we had, so for example, a project and it was in the process for 4 years. And when we looked at this, we were absolutely horrified at why it was in the system for 4 years. And it had 4 different changes within those 4 years. So it had also been through 3 different OTs, because what you tend to find is there was movement. So whilst it looked as if NIHE wasn't doing what they should to get this person the end result, the work that we were doing was constantly evolving and changing. So for example, we would maybe get to a certain point and then we would have to go back through planning. So it would look as if this person had been on this journey for a long time, but again, with the constant change, it's not helpful. At times, there are times when you can't mitigate that risk because, you know, the situation could change with their health. So they may well have been in one condition and then that would have deteriorated and such like, and then it is impossible to avoid that. So we've tried to have working groups and better stakeholder engagement and engagement with welfare officers, and our own colleagues in asset management have tried to come in at the earlier stages in terms of feasibility. And that's also important in terms of the likes of issues with ground conditions, issues with accessibility to the rear of the site, things that maybe the OT may not foresee that we would foresee as construction professionals. And sometimes it's helpful to get in at the very early stages to advise the tenant and the OT of what is and isn't possible. So again, resources, number 3, which I've already discussed in terms of the M&E design. We are finding that not only on the outside with the contractors in terms of their skills and labour, we're also finding it internally in terms of the professional side of M&E and, you know, the drawing and design element. And it is difficult to recruit, and we have numerous strategies in place in terms of how we take that forward. And we do have an appointment through a consultant at the moment, and that seems to be working very well. And again, we piloted that in the south and migrated that up to north. Number 4 would be the statutory body issue, delays with planning and NIE, and we do have quite a lot of that. And again, we tried to establish some working groups, and in some areas, our colleagues were finding it was easier to get chatting with these guys and discussing what their needs were and how we could work better together. But in other areas, at times, it was difficult to establish those relationships. What I have noticed myself in gathering my own statistics over the last few weeks in relation to pre-COVID and current days, what I find is that the certain stages have increased, and certainly the planning stages over the last 6 months have increased. So we're finding a lot more of our projects are stalled, and I believe there is a backlog with planning, but I mean, we will just do what we can there and try to move on as quickly as we can. So moving on to the next slide, Paul, if you wouldn't mind. So these are some issues that were spoke to the north area. We were having more issues, I've found, in the last 12 months in the north area, probably in the last 12 to 24 months, than we were having in Belfast in the south. We did have a variety of reasons, and which are listed there, the decant delays, which have been difficult, and that has been difficult even more so due to COVID. Probably the biggest issue facing North Region over the last couple of years would be the consultant performance. We had a consultant who had won a tender to commit to all regions, and they seemed to be unable to staff it. So we offered to work in partnership and take away the Belfast and South Region and leave them with the North Region, and they said they could facilitate this, there was no problem. And in the end, they couldn't facilitate it, and we had to move forward with terminating the contract. I believe then they also encountered other difficulties with other issues they were having on health and school work that they had, and that they said that impacted in their delivery model. And all in the midst of this, we then couldn't move forward with a variety of these schemes. So what we done was we moved towards the South model a lot quicker than we had intended, took on their backlog, and moved away completely from consultant use in North Region. And so we do not have any current plans to move back to that arena. And certainly we have found in the last 12 months the speed in which our own staff are delivering what the consultant used to deliver for us has certainly rocketed, and I mean we can prove that with various statistics, and we hope that that will continue to be. So finally, COVID, as everybody knows, has been a delay, and we can see that in terms of we've had quite a few delays on site in the last month, maybe probably the last couple of months. And we have had a few positive COVID diagnoses, and we've had to close sites and isolate staff, isolate contractors, and that has given us significant weeks delay, as well as the 23-week delay that we had when all of our sites were shut. Started to look at opening back up. We did look at those sites that did not have any tenants in them and where we could appropriately socially distance. So I mean the impact of COVID was initially the 23 weeks, and then thereafter on the little hotspots of the COVID outbreaks that we encountered. So moving on to the next slide, in just discussion of what I've mentioned earlier, the Adaptations Review Project. So in what I referenced earlier, we developed the framework, and that gave us approximately a 12-week saving, which is quite a lot in the overall journey to be able to reduce by those 3-month period. The performance management within the contractor framework was enhanced as well, because we had a variety of extras in the contract that we maybe didn't have before, such as damages, penalty clauses that didn't feature previously. And so we carefully addressed those, and they're within the new framework, and also even further enhanced within the current tender that is out at the moment. So the contractual queries and disputes were centrally managed by the central adaptation manager that we put in place back in 2017-18 that had never been in place before, but this was identified through the review project, and this has absolutely helped, and certainly helped with stakeholder engagement and a cohesive approach with all of the regions together. Then we had the development of the insight system and dashboard, which I'll go on to talk about in the slides coming up. And our monthly PRG reports were devised and bespoke to the adaptations. That's something that we produce of a month and send through to our landlord colleagues, and is our director would share the monthly PRG. We then share the adaptations report specifically with colleagues in DFC who do keep a close eye on this, given the nature of this work. So moving on to the next slide, which is the insight system. So this was something that DFC had instructed they felt we must put in place, and we absolutely agreed, because we felt that the previous world that we were working to, which was spreadsheets, really wasn't working for us. It was prone to human error, and there was a variety of things that could have went wrong within the spreadsheet world, as many of you probably know. So we were hopeful to move away from that, and then within the insight system, as noted in the bullet points there, it's fully monitored from the whole process, the whole process from start to finish, and there is a full audit trail. So it gives a complete overview of the process, and it was bespoke with its own suite of reports. And this piece of software was developed in-house by our own internal colleagues. And therefore, in any change that was required along the way, or anything that we maybe thought would enhance the process or the use, we were able to develop internally, and it was quite helpful. It also offers a variety of triggers and milestones, and the spreadsheet was almost like the differentiation between that and this is more of a performance management tool, as well as keeping track of figures. It also keeps track of the person, and so it helps them to manage their own time better. So just down to the next slide, you'll see the variety of the dashboards that it offers. So you can see how we can drill down, and I myself can log into this from home, and it's real time. And we offered the ability for a login to all of our housing colleagues as well. So as opposed to them waiting for an update, a meeting, a call, an email from a colleague in asset management, at any one time they can log into this system, and it tells them, is their project still in planning? What is it through the procurement process? Where is it? Are they waiting a decant? Or it gives a synopsis as of current day. So you can see the variety of fields that we can attribute to. So just moving down to the next slide, you can see how it drills in even to the north area. So what you can see is also we have this link to our GIS mapping. So what that gives is those little colours are linked to a variety of, for example, on the right hand side, we would normally have the project managers' names, but obviously for the purpose of this presentation, I removed the names. But the colours are the code of the project manager, and so it's easier for people to work smart and be assigned in areas localised, as opposed to the previous world where there was a lot more travel involved. And it also helps to record things such as any project issues that were bespoke to certain areas, such as maybe ground conditions, and anything can be recorded, so that if you so like, whenever you finish that adaptation and you possibly move on to another in the adjacent street or such like, that you'll be able to link in with the details in terms of what's special to that area potentially. Okay, so moving on to the next slide, this is really just the current status of the Derry and Strabane area and the different stages. So the project inception is, apologies for the typo there in inception, the project inception area is really when we just find out about the project, briefing is us moving forward with it, and all of the likes of the drawings and all of the various things that we have to do. And then the statutory approvals obviously is the planning arena. On site is whenever the contractor is there carrying out the works. So that's just a total of where we are with Derry and Strabane. So moving down to number 13. So I thought this is important. I had to give a presentation to the Housing Council last month, and so my stats were as of September 2020, and I looked back to reflect on the previous years just to see where we had gone. I could see it going the right way, and I could see things individually moving in the right way. But it takes a couple of years, obviously, for these things to pictorially make sense. So if we look at the project from the inception to on-site, I call those stages 1 to 7, and I call those the customer stages, because once the customer then it's completed at number 7, the customer moves back in. So obviously then thereafter we have a defect stage and a final account stage, but the customer is back in the property upon the completion of stage 7. So you can see the Belfast North and South area, and you can see to the totals on the right hand side the decrease every year, and we have decreased them significantly since the September 2017. So that in September 2017 we had 548 adaptations effectively on our books at any one time in that customer stage of 1 to 7, and as of September this year we had 386. I do think it's important to note though that we would have had a significant more handed over and completed between the period of March to September, but due to COVID we didn't. So I had estimated that 386 figure would have been at least 15% lower than it is now, but due to some of the COVID issues we'd had. What you can see as well is the reduction in the south area. If you look at the percentages of year on year, is more promising, but not so much in North, and I believe that's because of some of the issues that have impacted in North region over that I've earlier discussed, and I'm hoping to see that move away and move completely in the same direction as South, given we are now using the same delivery model. So moving down to the last slide, this is also very important to note, just to show you that whilst you can see the September 17, 18, 19, 20 changes in terms of the amount in the customer journey, you can see that the OT referrals have maintained the same. So whilst we've reduced the amount on our books, our OT referrals have stayed the same. And we've actually got quite a few stats around that and around cancellations and projects on hold as well. But you can see year on year that they have been static. The 2021 period, we believe we haven't had as many since the COVID outbreak, but we are advised that there is a whole raft of these due to come. So what we're preparing for and what our team is preparing for is clearing up as much as they can to get ready for what we think will ensue in the coming months, because we're envisaging that there will be a raft of these coming down the line. So we are in preparation of that, and had some discussions with the OTs representatives, who also gave a presentation alongside myself to the Housing Council there a number of weeks back. So that's really all I have, and then obviously the final slide is around questions, if anybody has anything.
Okay, thank you very much for that there, Leanne. Right, I've a number of indicated speakers. I've actually 8 in the list there. So what I'm going to do is I'll take the first 4 and they can put forward the questions. So if Clark, Andy and Leanne want to take note, and then you can come back in after the first 4. So indicated first is Councillor Logue.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not part of this committee, but I'm really grateful that you're allowing me to speak on this subject. I would like to welcome the reports from Clark, Andy and Leanne. And I suppose it would be remiss of me if I didn't start off by saying that it is a real pity that we're not in the council chamber today, especially in the day that's in it and the announcement that the Minister has made. I think that goes to show our commitment as a party towards the future sustainability of the housing executive, allowing it to borrow and build and to make it stronger in the future. So we really welcome the announcement today, and I suppose that will change a lot of the strategies that the housing executive have on board at the minute, but hopefully it will change them for the better. So I think I'll just maybe work back the ways and to say Leanne, Sandra Duffy and myself and a couple of other councillors, I think, met with yourself last year on this topic of the length of time that it was taken for disabled adaptations to be carried out. There was a real concern in the city and the council district, and I suppose all over, and you have outlined all the issues that were, I suppose, pertaining to why it was taking so long. But however, I think we have to welcome the new tool that you have developed in-house, and the dashboard as well as the more common sense approaches that yourselves are taking to trying to have these adaptations done in a more timely manner. And we look forward to getting all that put back on track, hopefully in the new year, given the recent situation with COVID that we have all been experiencing. I suppose to get on to Andy's presentation, while it was good, I do have to agree that I think that asset management and a strategy will be dead in the water, as you put it, because of the minister's announcement today, and that is to be welcomed as well. Just to get on to I suppose the annual update executive plan. Look, I'll try and be very quick. I have a few notes written out here. But just to start off with, this is our response on the accessible housing register. We as the party certainly welcome the development of the accessible housing register. This will help people navigate suitable housing solutions for them. We also would recommend that the housing executive instruct their patch managers to liaise with tenants who have already had disabled adaptations to their homes, to maybe do a survey on their current needs. And we say this because a lot of the people that those adaptations were made for have unfortunately passed away or have moved on to nursing homes. And the tenants left in them homes, you know, some of them, one or two I know, are looking to move, and there's quite a considerable asset there. One is actually a 4-bedroom property with a full adaptation, you know, and that could be help with the waiting list and those waiting on physical adaptation. So it would make sense if a survey could be carried out, even on a pilot basis, to see just how many homes that have those adaptations that are no longer needed and the tenants wish to move. Now, we're not saying push them out, it's if they wish to move, that is expedited. As well as that, I would like to say that it would be good if there is a register developed for applicants and transfer applicants who have physical disabilities, who, for example, require walk-on showers, that when they are allocated a home, that it is suitable from the time that they walk into it. I do know from experience, one couple, she hasn't been able to wash herself in her own home for nearly 4 years. She had to go to her sister's to do it. Sorry?
Got a good chance to speed it up there a bit, because I'm all time there.
So look, I will send on the notes on this, but just if you bear with me, Chair, please. I just want to go through.
Well, I've a lot of indicated speakers here. So
I know you have, and I really appreciate being allowed to come in on this. But housing is a very, very topical subject to this council district, and we have a high witness list, and I really would like to continue on. If you could just bear with me, I'll try and be as quick as possible.
Councillor, look, I'm going to have to cut you there, because you're nearly at 6 minutes now already, and I think I've been generous enough. I'm sorry, but even if you pass it on to Sandra, or I'll let you come in maybe later on when everybody else has spoke, but it's going on there a bit now, so I'm going to have to move on.
Well, if I could maybe just pass on. I know my colleagues will have.
If you want to write them in the chat box.
Yeah, no, it would take me too long, and I do understand that there is a high number of speakers waiting, and appreciate being allowed to speak. But I will, I will forward on an email form our party notes, if that will be helpful. I do know that if council colleagues coming in to speak on other issues, but I suppose I just want to finish off then by thanking. We have a great working relationship with the housing executive locally. There's a lot of partnership working, and this has worked very well. We have had a very difficult time over COVID, so I do want to thank the staff. I know Clark has already alluded to it in his opening remarks, but I do want to thank the housing executive staff who have continued to work in what has been very difficult circumstances.
I'm going to have to cut you off there. Thank you. All right, thanks, Patricia. Councillor Riley's next there.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, just as Councillor Logan said, thanks to everybody who has came along this afternoon to make presentations to us. Very engaging presentations, very detailed presentations, and obviously given today's announcement in the Assembly, very timely presentations. So thanks to Clark and the team for taking the time out of their diary to join us this afternoon, because I'm sure you have been very busy and in high demand to hear from everyone about how the minister's announcement today will actually play out for people like our party spokesperson and a member of the Department of Communities Committee, Mark H. Durkin, MLA for this council area, raised the issues today on behalf of our party directly with the minister. You know, we welcome the statement that the minister made in the Assembly floor, but we recognise that it is an aspiration. It is an aspiration that we share and we support, but we have to measure the success of it by the delivery of the announcements rather than just simply the announcement in and of itself. But given that we haven't had a minister in place for so many years, it's great now to be in a position where we do have a minister that is there leading on this, because this is an annual report that you give. I'm conscious that previous reports has been a case of we didn't have a minister, so a lot of the things we wanted to see happen couldn't happen. So it is good that we have devolution back, and it is well beyond the time that devolution started delivering for the changes that people need in housing, especially in an area like ours. Both in terms of rural and urban, because I'm conscious that there's high need across the council area, both in areas like Strathfoyle that are outside the urban aspect of the council area, but also then within the council area. And I'm thinking of my own patch in the waterside as well, where there's huge demand for social housing. I see Eddie Doherty's on the call, and I can't go without today, Clark, when you're here, asking again for an update on the development of the waterside triangle, because that is an area that has been in bad need for improvement for some time, an area that was promised some improvement, but then because of the lack of a minister, because of the lack of an executive, it stalled. So now that we have a functioning executive again, any update on that project would be appreciated. In terms of the wider changes and the plan, you know, the adaptation presentation was very interesting. That is a huge issue. It cuts across a range of government departments, and the delay that people face really does have a huge impact on their lives. So it's good to hear from Leanne about what is being done on adaptations. In terms of the housing situation and the housing point system, it is something that we do need to see an overhaul of. I know there's a lot of talk about the intimidation points and how those points can get interrogated better, but I do think that people who find themselves in temporary accommodation often find that the temporariness of that temporary accommodation becomes a longer, more permanent situation, and I think that the housing point system and the way that allocations are handled does need to be changed. But part of the big changes will be the borrowing power that the housing executive can get, and I think that as well as investing in the stock that Andy touched on and the need for that, we do need to look at how the housing executive can use its own resources and have the power to build more houses to answer the lengthy waiting list that this council area has. So, Chair, I'm conscious that you have a list of people who all want to make comments, so I'll draw my remarks to a close at that. But just to thank everybody for the presentations, and to hopefully hear an update specifically on the waterside triangle. Chair, thank you very much.
Councillor Gallagher is next on the list.
Did you say Councillor Gallagher?
Councillor Gallagher.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you everyone for the presentations. I think the first one, I think that and Clark comes every year and does a detailed presentation. I think some of the difficulty that the head of housing has come to do a presentation as year on year, you know, the social housing stress in this area, the large waiting list in this area, and when we've seen the lack of investment by the many successive governments of more or less put one hand up the back of the housing executive and around trying to address that. So, like that said, and that put to one side, what the housing executive I feel does do and does do well, and was the first line the clerk said there around finding and helping people find support and solutions to their problems. And my experience as a counsellor, I'm going to name drop here, Nick, but the likes of Eddie Doherty, Noel McNulty, Eddie Breslin, Paul Bell, Rush O'Neill, Jerry Owens, over the last year alone, the engagement that I've had that was very much unique problems, the housing executive was there to find unique solutions. And that's, to see, it's very easy to come and slag off the housing executive, but I think they're one of the statutory bodies that engage at a grassroots, that look at the problems, that understand the problems, and go out of their way to find solutions. So and some of, as I say, over the last year, those people I named have been great at it, and I commend them people. Some of the stuff that maybe wasn't touched on was around the COVID support funding that has brought the local areas, that has helped around a lot of the resilience plan at a local level. I think has been a great. Some of the engagement we have as council around antisocial behaviour and bonfires. I think there's been and this district area, I think there's been a lot of successes in that, and the housing executive has brought that some of those solutions to the table. So that said, going on to the second presentation around stocks transfer and all the rest. Some of the stuff maybe that wasn't mentioned was just for a lot of people it stank of privatisation, and that it was the demise of the housing executive. What you didn't mention was one of the possible reasons why was that tenants have a great relationship with the housing executive. Wasn't mentioned. All the other stuff around lobbying and engagement and rent, but a lot of people feel they have good access to the housing executive and the main. But what I would say to you is there also was part of this, and it's also the current context we find ourselves in. There was an element where the stock transfer was going on. There was also a centralisation that appeared to be going on within the housing executive. And I would say if we want to become more effective, we need to get back to decentralisation. And a lot of stuff was going on the cities, get it back out where it works at a local level. And it really does work at a local level. Just one other thing, just around, and it was pointed out, around adaptions. I think it's very important, and where I would find a lot of the delays is away the OTs. There needs to be a parallel solutions that go on with a trust and with a health service and with OTs that says this is a problem that's belongs to us all, and we have to find like networking and stakeholders that come together in order to try and minimise those many problems that are entailed from planning, from executive, from architects, from engagement. But the OT is the one that seems to be very much a blocker. You can get in through a lot of our problems, but the OT one seems to be a blocker. So I'm glad that that's been highlighted. And what I also say is Gable at the local level plays a very important role of trying to find some solutions. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Michaela Boyd.
Thank you, Chair, and I too want to thanks to Clark Andy and Leanne, Andy Derry and Frank for being here this afternoon and for a very insightful presentations.
given. I suppose just my comments are around rural housing and what's proposed for rural housing. Obviously, you know, we do need a lot of green infrastructure. People who live in rural areas do believe they are the poor cousins when it comes to, and quite rightly, when it comes to the likes of transport, housing and planning and the sustainability of rural communities. We need more vibrant, bright rural communities. So I would just be keen to hear, just in terms of, you know, planning for rural housing and work in that regard. Obviously, as I said, we need a whole community approach to development within our rural communities. And we have our flourishing mark in towns like Strabane, but and other towns. But when we talk about rural communities as a local communities, we need to ensure that we meet the local needs of people who live in the rural areas. You know, to sustain. We've seen in the past a lot of businesses in the rural areas closing because the rural housing stock isn't there, and there's nobody building apart from single dwellings within rural communities. So a housing development locally in the rural areas is what's needed to sustain the rural economy. I want to also just touch on the temporary accommodation as well, and I'm talking very parochially here when I talk about temporary accommodation. We have a place in Strabane, just to, you know, and it's one unit and it's very limited as regards to, you know, the type of accommodation that it is and the support that they can give to people. So I'm just wondering, in terms of temporary accommodation, I do know that there would be a waiting list to get in to Strabane, and support and housing is offered in Derry and elsewhere for people from Strabane. So is there any way maybe in the near future that there's plans afoot to build more temporary accommodation in the Strabane area? And also maybe, and this is probably a question for Eddie who might know, or maybe Andy, you know, what work is ongoing with the housing executive and their empty properties? How many do we have across the district, if that's known, and what work's ongoing to ensure that those empty properties, what we used to call the dole drops or whatever, that you know, there's a community approach to ensuring that these houses that have been allocated to individuals and for whatever reasons they're not occupying them, what work's ongoing to ensure that that stock is replenished back into the hands of the executive. So thank you, and I just want to also, would be remiss of me not to mention the work that has been done to date by the housing executive in Strabane. You know, the work with the officers, it's been tremendous, particularly over COVID, and I want to also add my thanks as well to the housing adaptation team in Derry, also Harry Grant and his team, and yourself, Eddie, for the work that you have been doing on the ground. So just if you could pass on my thanks to Harry and his team and the housing adaptations. Thank you.
Thank you, Michaela. Right, I'll hand back now to Andy and the rest of the guests to answer some of them questions before we take some more questions. So I'll give back to you there, Clark, now.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for your compliments. I always feel a bit of an imposter when I come to these meetings, because it makes me realise, as if I needed any prompt, just how valued and how respected my colleagues are locally. And Councillor Gallagher's point, we really do put a premium on those local links. I know Eddie and his team do tremendous work. I was going to say Doherty, so I'm picking up the accent already. You'll turn me into a Derry man yet. But, you know, I do make the point, we're not the Belfast Housing Association, Housing Executive, sorry, I'm being too quick there. And we're certainly not the Urban Housing Executive. So, you know, we do realise that we have responsibility right across this part of the world, be it urban, rural, be it in the west, to the east, the north and the south. So we're very, very conscious about that. I'll ask Paul Isherwood to talk about Triangle. I'll ask John maybe to give us some insight into what we're doing in the rural areas. I think very conscious that we haven't been hitting the targets for rural housing over the last couple of years. And I said to colleagues, please, let's hit the target this year. Let's end the year on a high. Eddie can probably fill in better on the temporary accommodation and what we're doing about voids and empty properties. But, overall, I think you've maybe captured that the work of the housing executive just affects so many people. And we do make a positive impact on people's lives. We want to be better, we want to do more, but say thank you for your comments, really appreciate them. So maybe if my notes, Councillor Logue, yeah, more than happy to take up your good ideas and information. If you're able to send that through to me, I'm more than happy to look at the idea of a register and a survey and so on. But maybe if Paul wants to start with the triangle.
Well, I think Andy's probably best placed to talk through this because his team has been doing the business case.
Okay, Andy then.
Yeah.
That's fine, yes. Mr. Riley, you asked a question on it. We have been working with the department very closely on this. As you probably know, we have a very extensive refurbishment scheme that is planned for the Waterside Triangle. There have been a lot of discussions with the department. It's very expensive. The department has a number of issues with it, and we have been answering their queries back and forward. In fact, only this morning I answered the most recent round of queries from the Department of Finance. Because of the size of the scheme, it also needs to go to DOF for its endorsement, as well as the department for communities approval. So we are trying to push this through. Because of the size of the scheme and the delegated limits that the housing executive has for expenditure, we do need departmental approval. So I'm doing my best to answer all of the department's queries and get those satisfactorily addressed as quickly as possible, so that hopefully we can get approval of the scheme and start to actually get it out to tender and on site.
Another point was about rural housing, what we're doing there. So maybe ask colleague John Cassidy if he could provide some information. Thanks, John.
Yeah, thanks, Claire, for that. Just on rural housing, we appreciate that one of the big issues that we have rurally is actually acquiring sites. We found that very difficult over the last number of years. We do have a housing need projection currently for rural units of 177 units. We've delivered 38 in 1920, and one unit currently was on site at 31st of March. And the programme at the minute, we have 36 units programmed for the years 2020 to 2024, and we realise that we would be very grateful if we could get more sites available. But as I said before, one of the biggest issues is actually getting land availability. So we are currently working on what I call site investigation studies, and we're also our own rural unit are working up a programme of latent demand tests for various areas. We carried out latent demand tests, I think, last year in Maharamison, and we've programmed to do one in Plumbridge, and we're definitely would welcome any councillors of any other areas that would wish us to do rural assessments, and we would be quite willing to do that.
Okay. Clark, are you talking there, but your mic's not on?
Apologies, Chair. And you, John, would know the answer to that question. Maybe ask Gary to respond to the temporary accommodation and empty properties voids.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yes, Councillor Boyd, there is no temporary accommodation as such, effective enough for Strabane. But it's timely that we're having a discussion about temporary accommodation, because we're having a discussion about the challenges that COVID has brought us in terms of temporary accommodation. Whilst we're in lockdown here in the city, we couldn't move anywhere. So there's been quite a lot of work going on and lessons learned about temporary accommodation. But we do take on board comments that has been made, and also in previous years, in relation to the availability of temporary accommodation in Strabane. Currently, myself, I'm in discussions with a developer who is working on temporary accommodation in Strabane, and I'm liaising closely with Frank on this for specific approval. One of the proposals that he is putting on the table in front of me is that in Strabane, in urban Strabane, he is now developing 21 one-bed apartments, specifically for temporary accommodation in Strabane. And he hopes to have that development ready in early January to try and address the need that we have in Strabane. So hopefully I will keep you informed of that. Discussions are ongoing, approvals have to be sought, etc. But it is progress in that direction, and I think this will alleviate a lot of the temporary accommodation needs in Strabane, and hopefully early in the new year we'll have something on the site to address that problem.
What empty properties?
Oh, sorry, the empty properties. COVID has kind of restricted our patch managers. As you know, our patch managers have not been out on site. But yet, whilst we do get reports in terms of our empty properties, we do thoroughly investigate these. In terms of numbers, we don't have an awful lot on our books at the minute. We have a fraud department in Belfast who we liaise very closely with. I'll come back to you specifically around numbers in Strabane, Councillor Boyle. I don't have them just here tonight, but I can assure you there is detailed investigations when these happen, because we have to maximise the use of our properties given the list of the waiting lists and the demand that we have for properties. But I will come back to you specifically with numbers and give you an update on that.
We covered all the points there, Chair.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So we'll go back to the councillors here now. Councillor Duffy, you're next.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate you allowing me in. And Patricia has touched on a lot of the things that we as a party wanted to say. I did acknowledge conflict of interest in terms of myself working for a supporting people funded project, but I would just like to begin by, of course, thanking Clark and Andy and Leanne for the presentations. They were really informative. I would like to thank Eddie and the local staff as well for all the work they do, and we do have a really good working relationship with them. Today is a really momentous day in terms of the housing executive and where we're at and things that we have been calling for a very, very long time. I know Patricia has touched on some of that stuff as well, but I would like to say in terms of, you see, even the ring fencing of Fontaine for Derry, North Belfast and other areas, that's really welcome as well, and that is something that was done away with by previous ministers who were in DSD positions, and I think that is something that has damaged Derry and our housing stock and where we were at going forward. But in terms of everything else, I have a couple of notes here, and they're probably around the homelessness issues, Eddie, and I know that we have had a number of meetings around it, but it would be remiss of me if I didn't take the opportunity to raise them here with Clark on the call. As a city, and particularly over COVID, and as somebody who works within the homelessness sector, we had noticed an increase in numbers of people who were being housed within the city, particularly within the city centre, particularly within pop-up B&Bs, as you want to call them. These people were very, very vulnerable individuals, had really high support needs, and they weren't receiving any support or services that they needed to have. They were being put in very dangerous positions at times. I know I have been contacted by a lady who had experienced a very serious assault in the city as a result of this. I think that is an issue that needs to be resolved, and I know that Eddie has been working really, really hard on that issue to find a resolution. We have good support services in the city in terms of floating support, and I think that those need to be utilised, but I think that there's wider work that needs to be done as well, and that addressing homelessness is not just putting a roof over somebody's head. I said it at our last meeting, we need to be ensuring that there is support available to very vulnerable people, to allow them to address their issues, to address the issues of their vulnerability, to address the issues of their homelessness, not simply by putting a roof over their head and thinking that's the problem solved. That's not the problem solved, very, very far from it. So it would be remiss of me not to have mentioned that now. In terms of supporting people, the Supporting People programme is something that's really close to my heart. There's obviously I work within it. And just again to reiterate, there's staff, frontline staff within that who have been working in that service, working particularly over the COVID period in hostels who haven't received any recognition or any pay rise in over 10 years. They're sitting in jobs that over 10 years ago they're getting exactly the same, only inflation has meant that their cost of living has gone up and their wages hasn't kept pace, and they're struggling themselves. Some of the residents within their hostels are on more money than they are. So I think that is something that hopefully the Minister will be looking at as well in terms of the fundamental review of the housing executive. Really do welcome the fact that the point system is going to be examined as well. I raised it last year and probably the year before and probably every year before that. In terms of it's completely unfair, particularly for areas like Derry, where, you know, in another area you might get housed for 40 points. In Derry, you're not going to get housed for anything less than 200 points. We have areas of high need, high deprivation, such as Craigan, such as my own area here in Ballyarnett and Chantal. These areas, then people need to be given a chance, and to get 200 plus points, it's a fight every day. And Eddie, you will know that in terms of yourselves, writing letters, liaising with your housing officers to try and get people's points up, because unless they're having 200 points, they're going nowhere, and they're going to sit in bed sits, they're going to sit sofa surfing, they're going to sit in overcrowded conditions or in housing stress for years. So I'm really delighted that is something that we're going to be looking at now. And just in terms of that as well, there is a development that is proposed for Craigan. I believe it's 119 houses, so well needed for that area, because you're not getting anything in Craigan probably for less than 240 points. So this is a scheme that Radius is bringing forward now, but there's a number of difficulties, and I would just like to say in terms of council, I know council has a role in it, and I hope that council won't be found wanting as well in terms of taking that scheme forward. 119 homes in the Craigan area is really badly needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Councillor Donnelly.
Thanks, Chair. And Chair, I'd just like to concur with the previous speaker's remarks about proposed housing development in Craigan. As somebody who's at the coalface and dealing with people looking for homes, you know, I think she's quite right. 200, well in the 200s. You need to get a house in Craigan, and I know people who are sitting in over maybe 212, 220 points, and there's no availability. So I think it's important that any opportunity we get to build social housing, then it has to be, you know, we have to grasp it. Regarding the housing executive, my views on the housing executive are well known. You know, it's a great model. I would like to thank Eddie and you know and the staff, particularly at Waterloo, because that's the office that would do most of my work. These people are you know, you could trust these people. You're going in and you're talking with some of the most intimate problems of your constituents, and you just know that they will do whatever they can in order to progress the case. So I'd like to pay that tribute. The announcements today, you know, the housing executive has an ethos, has a background in civil and human rights. You know, it was to divorce social housing, as was being said, from local sectarian politics. And you know, today's announcement, I'm just a wee bit sort of confused as why this is taking so long. You know, why do we have to wait till the housing executive is almost at breaking point before we come up with this? You know, it's a no-brainer. There's a demand for houses. More houses means more employment, people building them, more money into the economy. It means more rent. That rent can go back into that system, and rather than private landlords, where, you know, it can help with maintenance or whatever our issues where it's required. I'm a housing executive tenant myself, so not only am I work as a councillor, but in the home where I live in, I see the tremendous work that they do on a daily basis, and I'm hoping that today's announcement is a positive step. I'm hoping that it is the end of the attempted privatisation of the housing executive by stealth. You know, it was mentioned earlier about placards and that. myself and all our independent councillors have been on the street with placards, posters, shouting the odds about the housing executive. You know, the Hands Off Our Home campaign by NIPSA, you know, the stop transfer. We knocked every home in the Bogside, Rossville, where they were trying to, you know, offload it. And the response that we got, an absolutely overwhelming response, was that people were content with the housing executive. So I don't have a question as such. Some of the issues that I had have already been dealt with. But I would like to pay tribute to Eddie and the staff and Clark. You know, the housing executive needs to be defended, and, you know, progressives, trade unionists, elected reps, you know, we need to keep the pressure on to make sure that we have a properly funded housing executive going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Donnelly. Councillor Mooney.
Yes, Chair. I think my question has been already by our speakers. I'd like to start the three presenters today and pay tribute for the housing executive, who I would normally be on a telephone call on a day with in relation to housing issues. And really it was actually Councillor Duffy and Donnelly who touched upon the subject that what they raised was the allocation, the point system. I'd just like to concur with what their remarks were, and how difficult it is for people in Derry and in the district to get housed because of the point system and how high the ratios are each house. But apart from that, I'd like to concur with their thoughts, and that's all I have to say. Thank you very much to the speakers as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mooney. Councillor McClintock.
Chair, for letting me in, and much has already been said of what I would have said as well, but I just want to simply, without repeating what has been said before, just want to thank the presenters. It really was very useful, or three very useful presentations today, and like others as well, I really welcome the announcement today regarding the housing executive, and really look forward to seeing the outworkings of it in the days and weeks to come. It's clear really that people want to be tenants of the housing executive, and I think that even in the whole stock transfer issue, I think it's very clear that people believe that they have a good relationship whenever they are a housing executive tenant, and certainly we as a party in the DUP have found local people very, very approachable whenever we've had issues. I think just referring to the water side, I know Councillor Riley has already mentioned the triangle, but I think it has been great over recent times to see the great expanse of housing, social housing on the city side. But unfortunately, the water side does seem to be getting left behind, and particularly relating to the triangle, which Councillor Riley mentioned before. As somebody who used to work in an office in the triangle for quite a number of years, it's not now left there about 7 years, but unfortunately the comments don't inspire me with any confidence that the issues in the triangle are going to be resolved quickly. And somebody who worked very, very hard with the local people while I was there, I mean, it does sort of concern me that for various reasons, the delay does seem to be very extensive. So I do really hope that we come to some sort of that we move on from where we are as soon as possible. And just briefly, I suppose nearly everybody has mentioned the adaptations, and I suppose I really would like to just welcome the whole Insight programme, or whatever the name for that would be. I think it is the delays. The fact that delays can be flagged up in the scheme, I think, is very, very important. For there's nothing more frustrating for us working with people maybe on with great needs, or even maybe life-limiting conditions, and finding maybe that an officer has gone off sick and everything has been delayed. So I really am pleased to hear that any delays will be flagged up and hopefully can be moved on. I think really everything else has been said, but just one comment, Clark, you mentioned at the beginning that you're retiring. Can I just take the opportunity to thank you for all that you have done and for all the presentations you've made to us at this time, and I hope you have a very happy retirement. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor or Alderman McClintock. So I'll pass it back then to Clark on more questions or more answers. Clark, you're still muted there.
Oh, this is. Thank Councillor McClintock for her very kind words about me. And also, again, thank you for the compliments about the great work that my colleagues do in your area. Again, quite a range of issues and contributions and thoughts. The homelessness one, maybe ask Eddie to do more detail, but yeah, we did it. We didn't think just finding somebody a roof was solving the problem, but certainly given the urgency of COVID, we put a lot of emphasis on getting people off the street. And our original plan was to use hotels, for example, where we couldn't get more conventional accommodation. But then during lockdown, many of the hotels closed. So we were under huge pressure to find somewhere for people to stay. And I'll not make any excuses about that. In some parts of the region, we were actually quite desperate to find somewhere. And we do realise that ideally we would have had a support package, but in some occasions we just weren't able to do that. But hopefully we are quickly addressing that, and we have done certain things to make things better. But maybe Eddie wants to give some comments from a city perspective.
Yeah, thank you, Sandra. Councillor Duffy, we've had several meetings about this, and the Chief Executive is exactly right. COVID presented enormous challenges in terms of finding accommodation for people over the last year. For example, when we were in the lockdown, nobody was allowed to move anywhere. There was no allocations by housing associations. There were no allocations by ourselves. There was no movement in and out of temporary accommodation. So everything kind of ground to a halt. But homeless didn't stop. Homeless kept coming to our doors. Presenters kept coming to our doors. Challenges kept coming to our doors. So we had to, like the clerk says, we had to think of other solutions. I've basically taken 24 houses out of general needs of our own housing executive houses against the demand, and you've seen the waiting list of over 4,000, to furnish those type of houses, to find the solutions as we did in the floods, to try and provide accommodation to people. There's nobody more aware in this city that it's not just about the roof over the head than me. And I've talked to Clark in detail about this, and I've talked to Frank in detail. We need more supported accommodation in this city. Against the backdrop of COVID, things got a little bit skewed because our priorities changed. What I say now is I'm still working on that project to try and bring investment to the city that will allow us to provide not only the accommodation, which is the roof over the head, but also the support that goes along with it. You've heard Clark at the start talking about the demographics of the waiting list. The waiting list is mainly made up now of singles and small families. That presents challenge to us. But on top of that, a lot of people that are coming to us have a range of issues like mental health and addiction problems, and we have to find solutions for those going forward. I'm working on that as we speak. I have been chatting to people in Belfast, looking at projects in Belfast and beyond this district. I've been chatting, and I'm now trying to write a pilot to try and get a pilot started here to try and influence a business case to draw finance into this city that will provide accommodation going forward with that support needs is very much in this area. It is very much a work in progress, but I can tell you we are definitely making progress on that.
Councillor Duffy also mentioned about the Supporting People programme. Every year we ask for additional funding to increase the budget. We haven't been successful for quite some time. The budget has been capped at 72.8 million for quite a while now. And I know it's not much consolation, but that's actually quite an achievement. When other budgets have faced quite considerable cuts over the years, maybe 4 or 5% a year. But I do accept that that there are occasions where the pay rates do seem to be low. That would be a matter for the employer. And I was recently approached by Unison, and I was quite shocked when they told me that in some cases, people who aren't able to go to work because they've contacted COVID-19, and that could have been at work, it could have been somewhere else, but they're on statutory sick pay. I'm also quite concerned that at times when some providers have been complaining quite bitterly that they weren't funded adequately, they were able to put money aside to create quite substantial reserves, and that's something we're looking at as well. But I think the Supporting People programme is extremely important, and I think we've been quite energetic in trying to lobby for more money, but I wait and hope. I think the references to the site in the Craig, I think that's the Sean Dolan site. We have had recent and ongoing discussions with Radius. I'm quite hopeful that scheme can now proceed, and that will be a really important contribution to social housing in the city. Allocations, again, Eddie and Frank would know more about this than I do, but I think in any area, the number of points needed is a reflection of the tensions between demand and need and supply. So the fact that you can get a property for 40 points in one area doesn't necessarily mean that there's something askew. It does reflect the availability of social housing and the level of demand. But again, maybe Eddie and Frank want to make some comment about what's the position within Derry City and Strabane.
I'll speak if you want, Clark, on that. All the councillors that are in this council area tell me that their inbox is mainly consisting of a majority of housing issues. The demand in this city is continuing to rise beyond the supply, and that's one of the difficulties we have. So yes, the announcement today is very welcome, and trying to plan a way forward for that. In terms of the housing selection scheme, that's what we have to deal with. That's how we allocate social housing here and throughout Northern Ireland. And unfortunately, the demand for the like of Craigan and other areas in the west bank of the city is huge. And therefore that drives up the points, that drives up the challenges for our staff in terms of delivering. And our staff are working very, very closely with all of the councillors in terms of their individual constituent cases. And we will continue to do so given the very high demand that's there. The demand mainly exists in the West Bank. One of the things that people are not so much willing to do in the city is change their areas of choice to an area where they're possibly likely to get an allocation given their points level. Because they have got family ties, they've got children, friends, relatives all in a particular area, they've grown up in that area, and they mainly want to stay in that area. And that restricts what we can do in terms of the allocation. And it continues to drive up, the point system. One of the things that we have done this year is we've taken, and this was mentioned earlier, in terms of intimidation. Last year at this meeting, there was quite a debate around intimidation and some of the issues, and we have really, really tightened our policies and procedures within the city in relation to intimidation. And I think from recollection, the numbers of intimidation cases that are now come through the door has fallen for somewhere in the regions of about 40%. So we are making some progress in that area, but intimidation it seems to be going to remain with us. So we will keep working on it. We'll keep working with the elected members that are here today to try and find solutions, as Councillor I think McCluskey says earlier, to find solutions for those people who need it.
Yeah, that's that round finished. So I'll go on back to the councillors again. So Alderman Devaney is next on the list.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me in. I know I'm not a member of the committee, but I appreciate allowing me in. And I just want to echo my colleague, Alderman McClintock's comments that we welcome the good news today, that the Housing Executive are allowed to borrow money now. And we do hope that this will go some way in addressing the housing need and housing stress within the council area. But I would stress that while we plan the future of building houses, I think it's very, very important to have very much the thought on, whether the amount of 2 beds or 3 beds or 4 beds that needs to be built, because as previous speakers said, we have some people who are living in 4-bedroom houses would prefer a 2-bed. We have someone 3 who would prefer a 2. We have someone 2 who could go to a 3 or 4. But I think it's very vitally important how we plan that out in the future. Secondly, I just want to commend the staff, Housing Executive staff, 10 out of 10 times, which is excellent. We've always had a good relationship with them. And I just want to touch briefly, Mr. Chairman, on the points system. It's good to see that we're looking at that. And disability adaptions, it's good to see that we're moving forward to that there, because we all know the lengthy process that can take. It can take years from start to finish. The only thing I wanted to raise, Mr. Chairman, and I don't know who answers this, is in relation to upgrades. I have had an issue in Stony Falls in Donnamana about 2 weeks ago where there was an upgrade in some of the houses up there, and it was a new adaptation of new bathrooms and new kitchens. And I have to say, I was disappointed when I was called upon to hear that some of the tenants up there were without washing and cooking facilities for over 4 weeks. Now, I know we're in 2020 and we're going through a difficult time and stuff like that there, but I do believe that it's unacceptable that tenants would have to wait that length of time. I've done other checks on other areas where these adaptations have taken place. Some of them have been done in and out in less than a week, and I think it's difficult, Mr. Chairman, for anyone to ask anyone to be trying to live in a house while work is carrying on for 4 weeks. But good job to everyone.
Thank you, Alderman Delaney. Councillor McCann.
Thanks very much. First of all, at the risk of embarrassing them, sort of let me just chip in my tuppence worth to the torrent of praise which has descended upon the Housing Executive and Eddie Doherty and the local operation here. So that's just for the record, I'd say that. And also, I'd like to say that the Northern Ireland Housing Executive is a historic institution. It's also one which is cherished, with all its faults, and has had quite a number of faults, of course, over the years. The Housing Executive, when it was established, was seen by and was sort of a very significant move away from the domination of the of housing provision, sort of by small-time local and, as Councillor Gallagher said, frequently sectarian politics. Now, it's had its ups and downs since. I very much welcome the announcement by the Minister today that the Housing Executive is going to be able to borrow to build. You know, and that's relevant not only to the housing market. It's also, Leanne said in her presentation that one of the things that hamper, you know, a proper expansion of and repairs and so forth for the Housing Executive is the fact that there's a shortage of skills. There's a shortage of electricians. There's a shortage of bricklayers. Now, you know, so what do you need if you build houses? If you decided to build 1,000 houses, what do you need? You need brickies, you need electricians, you need plumbers, you need painters, you need glaziers, you need all those trades, electricians, all those sort of solid sort of trades that working class people, you know, have resorted to, sort of made their contribution to society down through the years. You know, and to get back to that, so part of the solution to the shortage of skilled labour is precisely to build a lot more houses. And I think that what should happen now, sort of, and if we need to have a little campaign to do this, we will, is that there should be an announcement of a crash programme of house building across the north. That's what we should have now. And as people said, if you borrow money, you can borrow money for nothing now. You can borrow money for under 1%. You know, so there's no reason why we shouldn't. And let's be clear that this represents sort of a triumph for the people against the people who have ruled over the north. The privatization of housing, the fact that the Housing Executive stock was being sold off, or it was proposed that it be sold off in its entirety. That was proposed by a group which many people have never heard of, the Strategic Investment Board. Some people with long memories might recall myself screaming about it in the council and elsewhere. The SAB had a plan. If you read the minutes of their monthly meetings, they stopped publishing the minutes of the monthly meetings some time ago because they didn't want people to see them. The SAB ran a campaign to privatize the entire housing stock in the north. The main thing that stopped them was that people just wouldn't put up with it. As Councillor Donnelly mentioned, I mean, so there were public campaigns. One of the key things people in Derry sort of might not be aware was in Ballymena, where some of our friends from the Housing Executive will know that. So there was a proposal to sell off, you know, houses in Ballymena, which was defeated when it was put to the people there. And that little housing estate, and they voted. I did a bit of door knocking myself in relation to that. The people defeated it. And you haven't heard much sort of about them selling off particular areas and parts of our housing stock in recent years. So Councillor Donnelly and Councillor Gallagher are absolutely right, and they will remember our meetings, public meetings, in the Bogside Inn and the Pilots Row Community Centre and elsewhere, leafleting tenants and warning them that this was going to happen and asking them to join in a campaign to give the housing executive the power to borrow and to launch a programme of house building. So the announcement of today and the changes of today, I'm not denying, of course, I welcome it. I welcome whoever took those decisions. But I am saying that these things would not have happened without the mobilisation of working class people to demand them and insist that they should be done. So I leave out of a lot more that I could say, but I mean, I've been, I know I'm not trying to act the old hand here, but actually I've been on about this stuff for more than 50 years. I was making speeches about the housing in Derry 50 years and more ago. So I'm delighted that we've reached today. But I have one question that maybe I want to ask of our housing executive friends who are here. Now, they may not be able to answer this. The announcement was only made to Stormont today. But yes, and there's the financial transaction capital. Is that involved here? The last time that this was mentioned in Stormont, we heard that financial transaction, the course to the help of financial transaction capital, the first time I had heard of it, would be necessary. The thing about financial transaction capital, it can only be accessed by a private entity, not by a public entity. So I'd very much like to get that cleared up, because we could be cheering and shouting sort of at the end to the threat of privatization of our housing, only to discover that there's little secret or unnoticed element in there, which is actually going to facilitate. And, you know, I take this is from NIPSA, and I take this from Dr.
Councillor McCann.
Okay, I'll do it. I'm just saying sort of that, I mean, I'm not sort of just grasping this out of the air. Dr. Stuart Smith, who did the report for NIPSA, has drawn attention to this point, and I've spoken to him, been in communication with him over this past couple of days. I mean, and agreed with his suggestion that we really got to get this one pinned down. So I'm trying to begin to pin it down now, that we don't have, you know, an announcement or a change that we all applaud and then discover that there's a little sort of wrinkle in it. So that's a question. All the rest of it just comment, I suppose, in history. But I'd like to hear that answered. If not by anyone's here today, and it may not be possible for them to answer it, then imminently by whoever can answer it. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McCann. Right, I have a few looking to come in here again, but what I'm going to go with people who haven't spoke yet. So, Alderman Work.
Thank you, Chair. And Chair, I'm not on this committee, but I appreciate allowing me 2 minutes. It's just to go back on one here on Councillor Duffy's comments, and I think Eddie sort of answered it about more or less the roof over the head. What I'm on about here is there's a severe issue here. I was actually dealing with more issues from the weekend, the week before, and even today on this here. And it's reference to B&Bs and more or less putting a roof over heads. There's a severe issue in communities now. It's spreading in the communities with a number of young people assaulted from the community. The people around these B&Bs. Obviously, you only have to drive up during the day now. PSNA are actually been there nearly over the weekend. Now, with the in my eyes, there's only one person can deal with the house executive. Obviously, whatever thing you see, Eddie, or whatever program, it needs to get in play now, and it's serious, because what I see, it's one of the heartlands going on to the city centre, and it's just making this a no-go area. And obviously, you have a play park not very far from it, and you have the bridge, but it's absolutely making a no-go area. You have churches there, and a lot of the retail are just had enough of what's going on in this vicinity. And obviously the residents now, you're on about people on about moving. There's lots of people on the now about moving their houses from that area to get away from this, from that social behaviour, from the drugs, from everything on this here. This is something that needs to be sorted ASAP, and more or less, obviously, we don't want any entrance coming into your city centre made into a no-go zone. So, Eddie, I appreciate obviously your comeback on that, but I just wanted to take the opportunity here to get this point on, because I've been dealing with issues on this today, and I think it's something you need to really, really look at here and get it sorted as soon as possible. Thank you.
Alderman Work.
All right, Chair. Eddie, you're doing an amazing job too. I just want to put that on as well. Thank you.
We'll see. I'll take it to Councillor Boyle. John Boyle.
Thank you, Chair. Clearly, the format of these meetings, it's probably made this one a little bit of a longer one for those who've joined us from the Housing Executive, and just to recognise the fact that you have given considerable time, and I don't intend taking up too much more of your time. I just wanted really to be associated and support the remarks that Councillor Duffy did bring up in relation to the subject matter, indeed that Councillor Work has again referenced. I have spoken to Eddie and your officers, Clerk, in relation to the particular challenges and the vulnerabilities of people who are finding themselves in these particular situations at the minute, and all of the various different challenges that presents. But I just wanted to impress upon yourself, Clerk, and I appreciate, just to say again, I appreciate the response from Eddie, and I know that you are working very, very diligently on finding solutions to these situations. They're certainly not easy to deal with. We all know that. I also would not want to in any way tar all with the same brush, because I know that the vast majority of those that you assist will be well behaved and do their best to be valuable members of society. But there are people with vulnerabilities. They are valuable members of society too, and we have to find the appropriate mechanisms for giving them support services going forward. And really, just to say, Clerk, I wanted to emphasise the importance of those particular support services, and really it's something I think that we need to expedite very, very quickly. I know it's been a difficult period for the Northern Ireland Housing Executive and the officers, and appreciate all of the great work that's going on. The challenges that you have are obviously magnified in a period like the COVID pandemic period. So just to say, I don't require a response. It's just really to be associated with the concerns as raised by Councillor Duffy. And I'm and my party are absolutely determined to help you, and anything that we can do to try and solve some of the difficulties that are being faced. And that's all I wanted to say, Chair, is really just to emphasise that I share those particular concerns.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Quick brief on there from Councillor Michaela Boyle, just wanted on again.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief. Chair, it would have been remiss of me not to mention, when I was paying thanks to the Strabane Housing Executive team for the work that they done during the local floods in Strabane, particularly to Noel McNulty and his team for the diligence, care and support that they showed to the occupants of the houses in the Ballycoman estate. And I know Councillor Geller and other Strabane councillors would concur with that. And also I see Councillor Geller has wrote in the chat box. I just want to be associated with his comments in relation to the flats at Lisnafin, Eddie, and also on behalf of our party to be associated with the comments to you, Clark, on your retirement. I want to wish you well, and thanks for the work that you've done with our minister and indeed with the party in general.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Boyle. I'll hand it back to you, Clerk, there now.
Thank you for your very kind words. I would agree, Councillor or Alderman Devaney's comments. 4 weeks at face value does seem a bit long. I'm sure it was quite difficult to work under those circumstances. I don't know if my colleagues would have any details on that scheme with them, but I think it's something we're more than happy to take away with us and have a look and see did something go wrong. But 4 weeks does seem a bit unusual. And you quoted another examples of 1 week. That to me would be more common. A tirade of praise, that was great, thank you. I really enjoyed that, Councillor McCann. Financial transactions capital. I think there's a risk here that I could extend the conversation. As far as I know, you're absolutely right. It is for private organisations. It's actually used very effectively in co-ownership. I think it's their major, if not only, source of funding. To be able to borrow, there would be some reclassification through the Office for National Statistics, Otherwise, any borrowing would score against the Northern Ireland bloc and simply wouldn't be, you couldn't make it work. But that's all I want to say at this point. I wouldn't claim to be an expert in FTC by any stretch of the imagination. We have a discussion about temporary accommodation. I think not all antisocial behaviour is caused by people who are homeless. So your comments, Councillor Boy, were I think well made. We do recognise that many of the people we try to help have a range of quite serious issues, behavioural issues, mental health, substance dependency. We're very conscious of that, but I will make no excuses from a housing executive perspective. We have a responsibility to find somewhere for them to stay. But we're very keen to develop multi-agency approach. Housing First is a concept that's been very, very successful in helping people who are probably at the more complex end of the housing need scale, as it were. I think some of the figures I've seen, well over 70-80% success rate in sustaining tenancies. But we do need to have that wraparound report. And I know in Eddie, you have someone who is always pushing to bring new solutions and new models to this part of your part of the world. So I think you have a very good lobbyist in Mr. Doherty there. I don't know if colleagues would want to make any further comments. Anything like it says, how can anybody forget about Strabane? If we did, apologies. It's certainly on our radar, and we know it has its own housing issues. But again, if Eddie or Frank want to comment on the challenges of providing good wraparound services.
Well, if I could please go first, I'm actually delighted that the elected members have raised the issues that they have raised, because I am, as you know, Clark, raising them internally. So for you to hear it firsthand here in the city from elected members is some of the most important issues that we have. I certainly welcome this discussion tonight, and hopefully we will continue, as Councillor Gallagher says, to go outside our lines to find solutions for people, because that's what we need to do here in the city. That's our ethos, and that's what we will continue to do, to try and find those solutions to people. And we will work hard at temporary accommodation to find solutions for those people who are most in need. And just to thank the elected members tonight for making the comments they did, and especially around me and the staff here, who genuinely are working very hard in the city to try and provide these solutions for people in very challenging circumstances. So on that, I will say thank you and good night.
Okay, I think that's covered everything. Clark, are you finished there now?
Sorry, Chair. Just there was a wee I don't want to put Eddie in the spot.
Oh, the flats at Lisfannon.
You know the block of flats in Lisfannon that there's been a
Sorry. Could I ask Andy to come in here, because there was some correspondence very late on today in relation to progress, and Andy would be much better positioned to comment on that progress. Andy, if you don't mind.
No, absolutely. That's why I took off the mute, because I was going to put my hand up there and just address Lisfannon before we move on. A bit like I said, Waterside, we have a scheme developed. We have a refurbishment scheme that will completely modernise the flats. We're going to do a bit of internal reconfiguration. We're also going to use it for an assistive technology project, and that's where technology can be used to help, for example, elderly people lead more independent lives. So we're combining the refurbishment with bringing in that technology. That scheme is going to our board for approval at the end of this month. My staff are just writing the paper now. It's been through other internal processes, so it's going to the board. We'll have to, again, as I said with Waterside, we'll have to go to the Department for Communities for their approval as well. But if we can get it through the board at the end of November, I'll have it straight across to the department within a day or so.
Okay, thank you, Andy, for that there. That's everything then. So all I can say now is I concur with everything that was said, and thanks to Clark, Andy and Leanne for the presentation. All the best, Clark, in your retirement.
Thank you.
Thanks to all the other officers present who took the questions, and thanks to Eddie and the entire local team who do a great job and they're always very accommodating. And I would like to say thanks very much, and thank you to all the guests for presentation. I know it ran on a bit long, but it was much appreciated by all the members here today.
No, thank you. And I'll get home early this year. I'm at home already.
Thank you, gentlemen.
I'll miss the lovely drive down through the Glenshane Pass.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you.
Thank you. And goodbye, everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Right. Oh, I'm going to vote.
Folks, I'm going to announce a comfort break now. Now, Councillor Donnelly and Councillor Riley have two proposals that they want to put forward, but we'll hold them off. So if everybody takes a 10-minute comfort break now, so I'll see you back here at 6:26. Is that okay with everyone? Okay then, members, everybody back ready to go?
Chair.
Yeah, everyone here. So Councillor Donnelly, you're first up.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, no, just I put the word in there in the chat box regarding can we write to the minister and call for the end of the practice of stock transfer? Councillor Gallagher second that below it just now. You're on mute, Chair.
With proposal on the floor there from Councillor Donnelly. It's in the chat box there. If everyone wants to take a read through it.
Chair, just on behalf of the SCLP, we don't have an issue with that proposal. Happy to support it. It's similar to what we had done in the past as well, so no issue with it from us. Thank you.
Okay. Has anyone any issues with that there?
No, Chair, we're in the same position, and I mean, like, as was outlined there in the presentation, they haven't even been an issue for the last 2 years. But with the review that the minister is carrying out under the housing executive, I suppose it wouldn't be bad to put it on record. But no, we would have no objection to the proposal as it stands.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Duffy. Anyone with any objections at all?
Chair, we're happy to agree with it as well.
Okay, so take it as unanimous then. So the council writes to the minister and calls for an end to the practice of stock transfer. Okay with that there, Councillor Donnelly?
Thank you, and thanks for the support.
Yeah. Are you happy with that? Do you want to say anything else, or are you okay with that?
I think it's just straightforward, given the developments today. You know what I mean, which I hope are a positive step. You know, the fact that the Speaker of the Day says it's still there, it's on the statute book. You know, I think that we should take this opportunity to call for the removal. It is a corporate position of council. There was a motion put to council and it was passed too. So I think it just complements the motion, given the change of circumstances. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Riley.
Thanks, Chair. I'll not delay the meeting much longer. It's in the chat box. It's been seconded. Thanks to Alderman McClintock. It's just following off the back of the Housing Executive Officer's reply to me. I think that this council should try and urge both departments, the Department for Finance and Communities, to move this on. This project was delayed by there not being an executive because it had got to the stage of gathering the business case previously, but then there was no minister in place to sign it off and to progress it. So now that we have those devolution in place again, I think the council should be pushing this. So happy to move it now, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Riley. Anyone on objection? I take it everybody's behind this here proposal anyway. So are we okay to put that on through?
Can I speak on it, please, Chair?
Sorry, Sandra, I wasn't sure whether it was that or the last one there.
No, it's this one. Just in terms of the proposal, have no issue with the proposal, absolutely. It's something that needs done. Our MLA in terms of Martina Anderson has been on the side of the triangle and trying to progress this. She actually had the minister down on site. I think it was June or July, the minister was down and visited the site and seen for herself the issues that were there in the triangle. The minister now is progressing the business case to the Minister of Finance. So while I have no issue with the proposal, the work is currently being done by the minister. She knows the urgency of it. She knows the issues that the people of the triangle are facing. Between Martina Anderson forcing it through and Christopher Jackson working on the ground there, we have no issue with this one.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Duffy. And I see Hillary has seconded Martin's proposal there. So we'll take that as okay and we'll move on then. Thank you everyone for I know dragged on a bit there, but I suppose it's something that everybody wants to speak on. Chairperson's business, I don't have anything, and nobody else has contacted me with anything. So I think we'll move on to again, item 6, the minutes from the Tuesday, 6th of October meeting. Any matters arising from that? Councillor McCready, you want to come in there?
Yes, thanks, Chair. Briefly, I forget the GSP. I just
What,
put in the chat
GSP
box.
14020?
Yes, so I haven't seen a report from that request in this agenda. I want to see why is it not included, and if not, I would like a verbal update on the 2 points which I outlined for response from council officers. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McCready. Alderman McCready, sorry.
Chair, I can respond to that if you wish.
Yeah.
Chair, the minute of 14020 refers to a future meeting of GSP, not this meeting of GSP. And we're currently working with the Business and Culture section, colleagues in Belfast City Council, other councils, and the port to bring forward a potential joint proposition. And we'll bring in a paper as soon as we've begun to scope that. The other issue is, I think it also was raised at full council last Thursday, that the port is invited into a future relevant committee as well. So we are in discussion around that issue at the minute, Alderman McCready. It's just going to take some time to pull the framework of that together. It's not a, let's say, a traditional free port type proposal. It's something a little more imaginative than that. That might be more bespoke to the needs of this council area. We'll come back to you as soon as something is available on that. We're aiming to get something in possibly into December's committee or at latest January's committee. There's not an absolute deadline for this issue at the minute. So we're trying to build a bit of consensus around the proposal firstly. Hope that helps.
Chair, John, thank you. That clarifies part of my inquiry. The last part which is still outstanding is there was a consultation that went out which stakeholders did reply to. I was looking to seek what council's written response was to that consultation. Thanks.
Right, sorry, I didn't pick that one up, Alderman McCready. I will, if there was something sent out to that, I think Richard Oosterhuis may have sent something out on that. I'll try to get that out to you.
That's all, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Alderman McCready. Thanks, John. Anyone else want to come in on matters arising? No? Everyone happy?
Chair, I propose the minutes, John Boyle.
I'll second that.
Who was that, Alan? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go on to item 7, strategic capital projects funding strategy. And is Alfie there?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Members, the report is for you to consider the emerging funding strategy for strategic capital projects, including the redevelopment proposals for Templemore and Strabane Leisure, and that follows on from the previous notice of motion in Council in May 2020. Members, as always, capital reports which we bring in always set out the substantial investment that has been and continues to be made in capital projects, with over 15.6% of our budget dedicated towards capital project financing. As also set out in the table summary in the report, members, you'll notice a total capital programme of 625 million, a very substantial figure. 116 million of that has been fully funded and either completed or in progress, with a large portion of that, 70 million, being leveraged from external sources. The focus of the report, members, is really the remaining 508 million in tables 4 to 7. Whilst we have allocated 10 million of council funding to progress those projects and secured a further 235 million through City Deal and Inclusive Future Fund and other sources, We are targeting other funding from external sources, but there does remain a gap, not only for strategic projects, but for the wider range of community projects and aspirations. The Strabane Leisure Project, members, for your information, sits on table 6. And obviously forms an important element of the wider Canal Basin Regeneration City Deal proposal, and the Templemore project sits on table 7. Given the nature of the projects, members, it's not anticipated that any other external funding sources are available to contribute towards that overall funding requirement. In terms of progress, members, there has been a lot of work progressed in the 2 projects to date. Council has allocated funding of 2.6 million to progress, and of that, 834k has been spent to date in bringing the projects to concept design stage. And that work has identified a cost for the full aspirations of circa 50 million in respect of the Templemore project and 20 million for the Strabane Leisure project. In terms of timeframes, members, they will obviously be more developed as the concept designs progress, but given the scale and complexity of the projects, it's estimated that design, planning, tender process from confirmation of budget would take approximately 2.5 to 3 years, with a similar period for construction on site. Addressing the specific issue of funding, members, it's obviously important that investment decisions for these projects are not made in isolation of our wider strategic aspirations, such as City Deal, including the DNA Museum riverfront investment, and also, members, very importantly, continued investment in community projects such as play parks and greenways. And a high-level analysis of the associated funding requirements was discussed at the recent Capital and Corporate Projects Planning Group, and this identified an overall capital funding requirement from Council of 98.75 million, which includes a small provision for community projects. Financing this, members, not only requires consideration of the capital financing and the associated loans, but also, very importantly, of the ongoing revenue budgets that will be required to operate the facilities once completed, such as staffing costs and utility costs. And also, members, not to ignore other priorities that we currently fund through in-year capital savings, such as our skills investment, etc. So when all those are scoped, members, the overall funding annual revenue requirement associated would come to circa 6.24 million. Obviously a significant sum, representing about almost 10% of our overall net expenditure budget. So the report sets out 5 key funding sources, members, as part of the emerging strategy. I'll just run through those. Firstly, we already have ring-fenced 1.36 million of this sum, which is a positive start through recent rates investment enabled by our efficiency plan. That on its own would provide borrowing capacity of up to 27 million, depending on the length of borrowing and interest rates movements. Secondly, members, you'll be aware that discussions are ongoing with government in relation to sharing the funding burden of the airport in the medium term, hopefully reducing council's annual contribution and freeing up funds for reinvestment in these strategic projects. It is important, members, that these discussions reach a positive conclusion. Thirdly, members, you'll be aware that capital projects are currently predominantly financed by PWLB loans, and we're involved in a range of discussions around securing cheaper loan interest rates and alternative sources of financing, and I'm happy to provide members with further detail on those range of discussions should that be required. The fourth item, members, is savings income generation. We've obviously realised significant savings through our efficiency plan up to this point, and income generation from our services will be an important part of the financing of these ambitious projects. And the fifth element, members, is rates investment. Obviously, investment of this magnitude will require further rates investment by council, and the funding strategy prepared sets out a rates requirement of 0.5% per annum over 6 years, and that will be included in our upcoming rates proposals. So finally, members, just to conclude, this strategy has obviously been developed in the midst of a very challenging financial environment and the significant uncertainty around many of our key income sources moving forward, including the rate base impact and also recovery of leisure income to pre-COVID levels. These challenges obviously present a significant risk, and detailed further consideration consideration will be required as part of our ongoing rates estimates discussion for 21-22. So members, the recommendations in the report are firstly that you're asked to endorse the emerging funding strategy for the strategic capital projects, including Templemore and Strabane leisure provision. You're asked to note that the funding strategy continues to be developed in parallel with consideration of the wider financial challenges associated with the COVID pandemic, and you're asked to note that a further report will be developed for consideration on conclusion of decisions in relation to the 21-22 rates estimate process, and also on further advancement of discussions with governments on proposed airport funding models. Thank you, Chair.
Alfie, thank you for that detailed presentation, as always. A few speakers. Councillor Cooper, you were looking in there.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to Alfie. I mean, the fact that we're even having this discussion about capital projects in terms of what we're still dealing with around COVID and the financial implications of that, you know, if we look back 6 months ago and the projections that were being made by council around losses, I mean, even thinking about having any capital ambitions would have seemed far-fetched at that stage, but because of the interventions of central government, Department of Finance, DFC and others, well, that has cushioned a lot of the blow that we've been facing. And at the same time, because we have been so prudent as a council over a number of years in terms of ring fence and savings, it's meant that we are in a position where even in the midst of this crisis, we can look to the future. And that's absolutely key in terms of giving our own people hope going forward and optimism that we're not going to be sitting still for the next few years in terms of our ambitions, whether that's local projects or more strategic projects, and in particular, obviously, around Templemore and the Riversdale project in Strabane, because they've obviously been on the long finger. We can say that very clearly. There's been false starts, false dawns, but I think in terms of the detail now that's been spelled out around specific figures and even timescales, I think we can now start to put a bit more meat in the bones in terms of starting to plan for the replacement of Templemore and Riversdale. So I mean, there's a praise across the board for Alfie and for the approach of the wider council team to get us to the point where we can look at this now with confidence, and the airport's considerations in terms of hopefully the successful outcome of that around those negotiations, meaning we'll have less of a contribution to make hopefully in this financial year and next year to the upkeep of the airports, frees up finance, but also referencing the fact that obviously there's the VAT case that Mid Ulster took recently, the successful result of that, pending the possibility that HMRC will appeal it. Hopefully they won't. That's going to take a few weeks to get clarity on that. But that will provide us with even more wriggle room in terms of what we're doing around our finances, hopefully. A significant wriggle room, hopefully. And even as a result of that, having a positive impact in terms of the rates process as well. So I'm absolutely delighted to propose this. The fact that we can now go forward with our current difficulties being addressed by central government, but also at the same time having having the ambition now to look at major strategic projects in the next few years. That's a very, very good news story, in particular at this time of the COVID crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. John, you wanted to come on there. Sorry, I missed you. If you want to come on before anybody else there now.
Sorry, thanks, Chair. Look, I don't want to interrupt members in the middle of commenting there, but it was simply I just wanted to come in after Alfie there just to say, obviously this isn't news to members. We had reported it into the Capital Working Group in September and then into each of the rates update meetings that took place during the month of October. But nonetheless, we felt it was important to get it on the record as a response to that notice of motion, so that you can actually see the outworkings of what we're trying to achieve here. It's one extremely complicated balancing act at the minute. An awful lot of other organisations are simply parking their strategic projects or strategies until a time where the mist is cleared and the way forward. I don't think that we personally as a council want to do that. I think we're trying on one hand to keep an eye on the strategic future while battling through what's in front of us at the minute. But you know, it is a very big challenge to pull together the finance that's available or that will be required for these projects. We do need a successful outcome to the conversations that are advancing at the minute with regard to the airport, and we need to get to get that positive outcome probably within the next year or so. And then obviously there are other sources that we've set out of financing, one of which is savings. But of course, we've also to meet a short-term savings target for next year, so that's sort of compounded on top of this as well. And clearly part of the strategy is obviously also rates income. So none of this can really be fully decided until we at least get through this year's rates estimates process, and that's why we're suggesting an incremental approach to this and hopefully an update report once we get to that point where we will have a better sense of where the airport discussion is going. We'll have a better sense of where the savings target has reached and where we're at with the overall rates position. So it would be fantastic to be in a position maybe in February or March where we could say something more solid around these projects. But I think the fact that we're discussing it, keeping it on the table and trying to come up with a solution is very positive indeed at this stage, and dovetails in with the rest of our community projects, but also our bigger city deal strategic projects. Thank you, Chair.
For that, Councillor Michaela Boyle, next there.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, John and Alfie. Financially, but I do believe it is very, very important, John, that both these leisure bills, the Temple and Riversdale, these fantastic strategic projects, who are of equal importance, that they are brought forward. It's crucial that the development of the new leisure build for Strabane, and I wear my parochial hat when I say this, that it's progressed on an equal footing with Templemore in relation to internal and external funding allocations, and John, that the relevant officers within councils, when the time comes, be mandated to take both projects forward on that basis. I just think it's important to say that there is an expectation here in Strabane. It's talked about a lot. When's our leisure centre coming? As you know, John, with meetings with ourselves and others, on the ground. So just to note that both are equal of importance, and it is crucial that the development of the new build in Strabane is progressed on an equal footing with Templemore. Thank you.
Chair, just if I could just briefly come in on that one. I mean, absolutely, Councillor Boyle, there's no question of that. As a matter of fact, I would almost argue that the Strabane project is strategically more important than the Templemore project because of where it's placed. We've been able to lever in all of that city deal investment into the same site, and used our sort of anchor project on that canal basin site as the impetus for gathering health and education around it. So, I mean, we are looking, hopefully, as we progress through next year, that the total sum that will be available for investment on the canal basin site being somewhere in the region of 70 million in total, which will include Council's Leisure Centre. So I think that's a very, very long way away from where we were this time last year, where it was really just aspirational, and it looked like something that might be on the long finger for a very long time. We've been moving after heads of terms are signed, which will hopefully be this side of Christmas, into production of detailed outline business cases for all of those projects, and the Council Leisure project is absolutely at the heart of those, and is pivotal in advancing all of those projects. And just one other thing, we stopped calling it the Riversdale project because it's not in Riversdale.
Councillor John Boyle.
Thanks, Chair. A similar sentiment, obviously, to Councillor Michaela Boyle. The ambition for both projects should, in our view, certainly progress in tandem where possible, and obviously we want to see that continue. I mean, Chair, just to reflect on the report itself, it's entirely self-explanatory. It's very well laid out. And what it does is really it further focuses and concentrates the minds as we progress the rates considerations in the immediate financial year ahead, and indeed in the and over the next few years ahead. And so, you know, it's healthy. It is a healthy thing to continue to plan ahead in that manner. I concur with Councillor Cooper. I mean, there are many and varied challenges that the council currently faces and will face financially going forward. But we should always try to give some degree of perspective, because I do believe, of course, that this too will end, and we will see ourselves coming out the far side of it, and it's what this place looks like and feels like for citizens after that is equally important. So clearly, I'm very conscious. I don't think I need to declare an interest, but obviously I'm conscious of the airport situation. Being a member of the board of management of the airport, and of course that is, and if you all pardon the pun, that's still significantly up in the air. But I can just to say I do encourage officers and indeed those involved at the airport board level to continue with the deliberations and the negotiations that they are doing. I am extremely hopeful that we will see a reduction in expense to this council. But it's absolutely vital, of course, that level of government support, as outlined in previous reports to us, does arrive on our doorstep to make these sorts of projects feasible going forward too. So again, Chair, I went on a wee bit there, but just to say thanks for the report again. It is again a focus for all of us going forward, and in the next number of months we do need to focus on that too.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd. Alderman McClintock.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to Alfie for the report. There's no big surprises in it, really. We do need to maintain our commitment to our strategic projects. And although it's a complicated picture financially, but I have every confidence that what Alfie has brought before us is achievable. The one, I suppose, small concern would be over the rates investment, the 0.5 increase, but yet I think we're not committing ourselves completely at this stage. But as Councillor Cooper has already said, there are many variables, including the HMRC issue as well, that will be coming into play. So I think this is a very positive story, and just thanks for the report, and happy to go along with that report. Thanks, Chair.
Alderman McClintock. Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Chair, for letting us in. And just, I would like to very much concur with Councillor Boyle's comments around the leisure centres of being on equal par. And I note that the Chief Executive says there was no question of that, but if we just went back to the last full council meeting we had in February, there was a motion come in from Sinn Féin looking about the Templemore project to get progress first, but that was withdrawn. So not that there was a question of it, but there may have been a suspicion that some were looking to progress others over others. But I would agree with the Chief Executive that the Strabane one is part of a major strategic plan that has the potential to bring Strabane up into the 21st century as regard strategic business plans within Strabane Town Centre, our new footbridge, all the stuff around the canal basin, stuff around centralising education and health, along with our leisure centre, that the leisure centre is a key piece in that jigsaw puzzle that will trigger the rest. So I think that when we're talking about strategic planning, this will be a Strabane that will have a massive increase in footfall within the town centre for years to come. So very much supportive of that. Just with regard to the airport, my views are well known on it, and if the ratepayer paying fortune and money for it, but I will keep my powder dry on that. As you say, it's incremental, and let's see how that works out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Alf. Alfie or John, do you want to come back in on anything? Or you okay? Okay, thank you, Alfie, for the presentation. I need a proposer and seconder for that.
Chair, I got proposed that already.
Oh, sorry, I meant to hear you.
I second Councillor Cooper there, Chair.
Okay, no bother. So item 8, job support scheme. It's Paula there.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update members on how we plan to implement the job support scheme and seek endorsement of our approach to date. However, I need to highlight, since this report was circulated, the government announced further changes at the weekend, and the current furlough scheme has been extended for a month. The current furlough scheme has been in place from the 1st of March, and to date we have furloughed in the region of 270 employees, mainly across our leisure services and visitor services. And these employees have been furloughed on 100% of their current pay. So a new job support scheme is anticipated to come into effect now at the beginning of December. Originally it was to be the beginning of November, but it's now anticipated this will be the beginning of December. And the Department of Finance have confirmed that Council can access this scheme. So that what this scheme, all employees must work a minimum of 20% of their substantive hours, and then 61.67% of the non-worked hours can be claimed from the government, with the council also liable for NIC and pension costs. So consultation is currently ongoing with the trade unions and the relevant employees on how we utilise this scheme moving forward. And at this stage, it's anticipated that, again, many of our employees in leisure and visitor services will be supported by the scheme. It's anticipated that all employees will return to work for a minimum of 20% of their substantive hours, and will continue to get paid at 100% of their contracted hours. At this stage, there are no implications associated with this report. A further report will be brought back to committee on the financial implications at a later date. So it's recommended that members note how we plan to implement the job support scheme when it comes into effect on the 1st of December, and seek endorsement of our approach to date. We will keep this under review and members will be updated accordingly. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that there. I suppose that going back up to 80% is a bit helpful as well with the budget. So, Councillor Michaela Boyle wanted in there.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. And apologies, I can't start my video. I have a very short lead. My battery's about to die, and I don't want you seeing me sitting in a corner, in a very dark corner beside a plug. But no, just thank you, Paula, for bringing that forward. It's very helpful information at a time, you know, and it's welcome, so it is. But I suppose just on 3.2 that you did cover, you know, in regards to employees and where you set out the stall about, you know, their hours worked and the non-hours and all of that. So just to say that it would be important, Paula, that obviously, you know, when this does be implemented and it comes forward, that employees within our council know exactly, you know, what's expected of them, you know, and in terms of, you know, having to access a top up for hours not worked and all of that, you know. So is that something that will be communicated out to your employees? But thank you, and the proposal is noted. Thank you.
Yes, we will be communicating that, you know, to our employees and to our trade unions, and you know, and how we plan to utilise the scheme.
Just to say, Chair, and respect to those, I mean, I think the impact on our employees should be seamless. I mean, all of this application work and liaison with government will take place via ourselves. So there shouldn't be any burden on employees, certainly ours within council anyway, to deal with these issues. We'll keep them communicated in respect of what we're doing, but the end result will hopefully be that employees will still receive their full paychecks at the end of the month. I mean, we take care of what has to be done to ensure that happens.
Okay, John, thank you. Councillor Riley was looking on.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to Paula for the report. I agree with the the sentiments of what Councillor Michaela Boyle had touched on, so I'll not rehearse them, but just note support for them. Chair, on a related item, in relation to job support, I'm conscious that student nurses in the first wave of the pandemic got support from the Department of Health in terms of a wage for their work. These are people that are learning their profession, doing it on the front line, taking risks that they then have to endure. And rightly, at the start of the pandemic, the Department of Health introduced a payment for student nurses. Now that payment has ended and hasn't been introduced again, as the figures that we have seen in relation to the case numbers has dramatically risen. Thankfully, it is coming down again, but the figure is still well and above what we would like it to be. So could I propose that the Council writes to the Department of Health asking the Minister to reinstate the payment for student nurses in these circumstances, just as had happened in the first wave of the pandemic? Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Riley, thanks for that. And note that Councillor John Boyle has seconded that. I take it that's unanimous on that there. I don't have to put it to a vote. So that this council, if you could put it on the chat box there, just Councillor Riley. Everyone happy enough there to move on?
Chair, the proposer and seconder for Paula's report.
Yeah.
I'll propose it, Sean Mooney.
I'll second it.
Okay. John Boyle seconded Martin's proposal there. So I'll move on to item number 9, overview of projects and initiatives to promote the language of Irish and Ulster Scots. Ellen?
Yes, through you, Chair. This report aims to provide members with an overview of the projects and initiatives which have been undertaken to promote Irish and Ulster Scots and to enable the Council to fulfil its obligations under the European Charter for Regional or Minority Languages. As indicated in the report, that charter applies to a number of languages in the UK, and indeed each of the different languages has been identified to have a different level of intervention under the terms of the charter. In our local context, that would require us to treat Ulster Scots as a Part 2 language and Irish as a Part 3 language. The Charter itself identifies a number of potential measures, and the Council has progressed its work in the context of using the Charter as a framework for our initiatives. As indicated in terms of the report there at 3.5, the Council of Europe undertakes periodic monitoring to ensure the signatories are fulfilling their obligations under the treaty, and also then at 3.6 in an independent report which was commissioned and undertaken in 2019. This council was deemed to be only one of 3 councils which was meeting its obligations under the charter. The council continues to work collaboratively with partners to identify new approaches to promote awareness of both languages, including and particularly in terms of Ulster Scots. And what you can find in terms of the appendices there is examples of the creative approach we've taken to identify opportunities to promote languages into public life and where possible jointly, and also where we can synergy between the languages. And also at Appendix 3 we've provided a number of showcases in terms of how the Council is using a variety of communication channels as such to enhance the promotion. At this point in time, in terms of the implications, the work that's being progressed is to facilitate our legal obligations, continuous improvement, and the participation of rural communities. And in terms of the recommendations, that it's proposed that members note the positive progress in fulfilling our obligations under the European Charter, and that members endorse the approach undertaken to date. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Ellen, for that report. Mary, you wish to come on there?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I'm not a member of this committee, so I'm grateful to be given time, and I won't speak too long. I just welcome the report. I'm happy enough to propose it. As a Irish language speaker and a lover of languages and someone with a keen interest, you know, in Indigenous languages generally, I think it's very important to note that our council is doing well in meeting its obligations in terms of Irish and Ulster Scots. I think it's important that more positive stories about our work on languages continues. You know, it saddens me that often language comes into chamber as a matter of negativity, or, you know, it's often politicized. And, you know, this committee of experts report that we've got here from the European Council, it sets out recommendations that can be explored further. We also have the New Decade New Approach legislation that is to be brought forward during this mandate of the Assembly now. And I know that work has been ongoing in the background with Irish language organisations, and that have been input. And also it's a package of legislation, so Ulster Scots too. So I want to suggest, I want to pay tribute to the excellent work that our language officers do. And they go about quietly and they get on with it, and it's on a very limited budget compared to other councillors. But in spite of that, you know, we're ahead of others in terms of promoting the likes of the Ulster Scots. And then we've got a very proactive Irish Language Forum, which is an engagement forum for Irish language community across the city and district. But I also think it would be timely, given what I've said out there in terms of this report, in terms of New Decade New Approach and legislation to come, that we reconvene the language working group. We haven't met now since the start of the pandemic, and also, you know, perhaps revisit the terms of that language working group, maybe broader terms of reference. So that would be my proposal, but I do welcome this, and I think we can do a lot more positive work here.
Chair, John Boyle, who just to say, Chair, obviously I put it under the chat box there, but clearly I will propose that on Mary's behalf.
That's okay.
So it is a proposal coming from the SDLP. Thank you, Chair.
No bother. Councillor Cooper.
William Takiak, Shaw, Foster, Chair, I'd like to support this as well. So happy to second the proposal in terms of the fact that an external body has come on and basically confirm what we all knew, that Council was meeting its obligations and going over and above that. I think people can see that, both councillors and the wider public can see the amount of work that's been done by Paul Freed and his team to make sure that we were exceeding our obligations in terms of promoting Irish and obviously the Ulster Scots tradition as well. And this is all in the context of obviously the Irish Language Act and progress being made on that, and what Mary had referred to around reconvening the language working group, you know, and that against that backdrop, against that background, you know, taking into account COVID has obviously disrupted things, but you know, no issue from our perspective that the working group will be reconvened to look at how we can build on the progress that has been made so far, because I think, you know, the last few years in particular, we've seen a massive amount of work done by the team. Now we're in a more sort of, if you want to call it, regional context around having more political support for progressing on the Irish language front in particular. So from our perspective, it makes absolute sense that we start to ramp that up locally as well as a council through the working group. So we have no issue with that whatsoever. But in particular, just to pay tribute to the team, I'm looking forward to seeing how we're going to bring forward further proposals. As we come out of COVID in particular, try and hold more events that don't have to be virtual. You can hold actually more live events, which our Irish speaking population can avail of in the coming months. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper, thank you. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, just to agree with the issue that Councillor Durkin brought up, I think Councillor Boyle was it that proposed it regarding the working group. I think, you know, it should be resurrected, and I definitely agree. We're looking at you know, the remit of it, and perhaps, you know, going a bit broader. There's also other aspects of it, Chair. You know, there's been quite a bit of work done on that regarding signage. And this working group has been set up initially, I think, you know, after I think it was January 2017, And here we are almost 4 years later, and that working group, despite meeting extensively and having a lot of input into it, we still haven't made a decision on signage, and you will forgive me for thinking that it's been used as a tool to kick decisions down the road. But as I say, coming up on 4 years, a wee bit of a long time, but happy to get it back up and running and look at the remit of it.
Donnelly, thank you for that. No one else indicated they speak on this. No, so the proposal there just to obviously get the working group back and the meetings again. Ellen, thank you very much for that presentation. Councillor Boyle and Cooper proposed second that. We're going to be open for information now. So is anybody wishing to speak on any of these items for information?
Yeah, can I come in briefly on one of them?
Yeah, that's noted. Yeah.
Just to reflect on the report presented in relation to the press office and the media evaluation, the report number 14, Chair. I record on behalf of the SDLP our appreciation of the very significant work carried out by a relatively small team of officers who I know have many times gone well beyond the call of duty to this council and to us as representatives. They are very, very effective at what they do in a very challenging environment at the best of times. The level and the number of inquiries that they get and their output in relation to that is absolutely first class in my view. The level of support that department gives to council officers, to councillors, to committee chairs, to the mayor, the deputy mayor. Genuinely, I'm fulsome in my praise of the work that they do. On a personal capacity, I know that they work well beyond the hours that they are remitted for. And going back even in the time that when I was the mayor, I know if I needed assistance or help or advice in relation to a media query, would not have been something that would have been turned away even on a Saturday night. And I think we all have experienced that in many regards. So it's just to put on record on behalf of the SDLP our thanks to that particular team, small be it that it is. It's an extremely active team. And they are, of course, now during the COVID period. Also, we were reflecting on this in our own group meeting. They were also delivering messages on behalf of central government to citizens across our city and district. And actually, the mayor was actually outlining to me that there have been some central government departments who've been very fulsome in their praise of the work of this team as well. So long may it continue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Boyle. Could I have a proposer and seconder just for that information?
Well, you need it, Chair. You don't need a proposer for that information.
Just to cover them all. All right, okay. Let's see. I would also like to thank the press office as well. I think during COVID they've been brilliant at getting the message out there. I'd like to comment on 16 as well. NI Charter for elected member development. To thank Sharon and the team for all the hard work and effort applied to achieve the Charter Plus again, and thank them for providing various training courses and sourcing new training courses that members have requested. Okay, and we'll go into
Chair, just as obviously the chairperson of that particular member development working group, I had intended to speak on that, but just to say I also concur with your remarks in relation to that. Again, the officer teams should be recognised and appreciated for all the work that they put on, led by Sharon and Karen in this particular instance.
Okay, thank you, John, for that there. Was that everyone wishing to speak in that there? We'll go on now to confidential.
Chair, 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 just as obviously the chairperson of that particular member development working group, I had intended to speak on that, but just to say I also concur with your remarks in relation to that. Again, the officer teams should be recognised and appreciated for all the work that they put on, led by Sharon and Karen in this particular instance. Okay, thank you, John, for that there. Was that everyone wishing to speak in that there? We'll go on now to confidential.
Chair, could I just double check that we're in confidential there?
Yeah, yeah.
Alan, can you check that for us, please?